The thingamabob, there it is.
Mr. Tate, we are live.
Thank you, Mr. Frederickson. Good evening. It's Thursday, December 16. This is a joint meeting of the Council Rock School District's Facilities Committee and the Finance Committee of the school board. And I'm chairing Facilities. Ed Tate, school board member. We'll go around the table and introduce ourselves. We'll do Facilities Committee first, and then we'll have Finance Committee. So let's go around the table and introduce ourselves, please.
Yetta Parley?
Joe Hidalgo, school board.
Ed Salomon, school board.
Mike Thorburn, school board.
Michael Roosevelt, school board.
Matt Frederickson, IT director.
Robert Frazier, superintendent.
Susan Elliott, assistant superintendent.
Doug Taylor, director of operations.
Jason Harris, director of business administration.
Kristen Marcel, school board.
Mary Ann McKee, school board.
Thanks, everybody, for making time to be here. We'll turn over the meeting to Doug Taylor, our Director of Operational Services.
Thank you. And welcome to Mike and Yodi, your first facilities meeting. It's nice to have you here. I did hand out that book, so go through it, and then we'll review it and be tested at our onboard. So I'm going to move quickly because I know there's a lot on the agenda tonight. I'm going to touch on energy management, some of the facility projects that we have going on, the capital projects, some miscellaneous items, some follow-up to the lead and drinking water that we have performed, the testing yearly, the board agenda items, and then hand it over to Dr. Elliott for a piece of presentation as well. So from an energy management standpoint, we have seen a little bit of an increase in the cost, the gross square foot cost. We're tracking that as primarily attributable to two things. One is the increase in outside air that we're taking in the district because of the COVID. It does require the systems to function a little harder. It uses more energy. And we've seen an uptick in a couple of buildings. Specifically, South is up a little higher than it normally should be. So as I talked about last meeting, I'm talking to Aramark about coming in the energy piece of Aramark and doing some commissioning for us in a couple of the buildings that look like they are consuming more energy than they should be. We get a monthly report that shows us where we do have the issues, but one of the services they can provide for us is more of a weekly lookout of what the buildings are doing so we can see exactly where the usage is increasing, looking at the building management systems, looking at them more closely to see on a regular basis what time of day, what the issues are, and try to develop a plan to address the higher need buildings, because we don't want these numbers to creep up. So we're waiting for some revised proposals from them, and when I get them, I'll bring them back and we can talk a little more about it. Facility improvements. Hillcrest Elementary School is moving along very well. We have the demolition complete. All of the interior work is underway. The infrastructure is going in. We have mechanical, plumbing, electrical systems above the ceiling. Everything is looking very good. We relocated the gas line. There was some challenge as a part of the project getting PICO to come out and relocate some lines for us. There was a delay. We had storms. There were all sorts of things going on. So some of it was fair on their part to just not have their energies focused here, but they were elsewhere. We are making up for that lost time from that piece, so there's really not a major concern there. I have a couple of photos. And working on procuring the technology that we need so the contractors we hand it over, the contractors install it, we purchase it because it's cheaper for us to purchase than for the contractors. And then furniture, starting to work with the CEO looking at furniture. So I won't go over all the dates, but any of the key milestone dates, we're looking very good. As I said, the erection of the structural steel is a very small addition, but it's an important addition. It's a mechanical room. It's where all our new equipment goes. We need to fire up to get the building ready for the spring. The foundations are in. We have the footings in place, and the steel erection has actually started now. So we are moving along on that. Because the addition is so small, I don't anticipate having a problem getting it watertight before we see serious winter weather. So we're good there. The roof systems, we're replacing the entire roof, and they're almost finished replacing the roofs. They're in good shape there as well. And all of the other work, the installation of the mechanical, electrical, plumbing support systems, 3rd of January, they're near completion of all of that. It's in really good shape. And I'll continue to track these as we get closer. This was the front of the building where we're putting a new bump out, an addition. That's coming along. Actually, all of the footings are in place now. The classroom framing is good. We have all our rough ends. You can see the important part. The mechanical system is in place. All the power controls are pigtailed, waiting to make connections. We have plumbing coming down the walls to make the connections to sinks. And a lot of the power is starting to come in. They're actually starting to drywall the building now.
Doug, you have data in there too? I can't see.
We do.
I'm assuming, yeah.
Yeah, we do. We're putting the data lines run across the hallways. I'll
Okay.
show you some of that. This is a gang toilet room. You can see we have all of the plumbing roughed in for those as well. And here you can see the ceilings. We have a very good shot of everything that's happening. The hydronic piping, the fire protection piping, domestic piping, ductwork, and some of the other wiring that you're talking about, Mike. This is the library, starting to get that roughed in. And this is that small addition, but the structural steel started a couple of days ago, so they're moving along on that. And then an aerial shot, you can see we have the majority of this roof with the cap sheet, base sheet in, and we're finishing up this roof here. We were fortunate to get roof insulation. That is one of the items that's difficult to procure right now. So we're fortunate to have everything we need. And this is that piece of the addition that we're talking about. This is a mechanical corral, so we'll have a chiller out here, a generator, and an overhead door. Trucks get back in and deliver to the building, and then it goes through the mechanical room and then out into the rest of the school. Otherwise, the footprint remains as it is. So, Langston Elementary School, again,
Well, can I ask you here? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Hillcrest, any issues with the Wi-Fi that we saw in Rolling Hills that,
No, not nearly the same as Rolling Hills.
okay, we're good?
We're good.
I'll throw in another question. As far as the roofing material, are we doing the whole new roof or just the addition?
It's all new.
Okay.
Yeah, the roof was an original 20-plus year roof, and 10 years ago that was coated to extend the life. So it was a rubber membrane roof that was coated with the White Knight product.
Okay.
That's basically disappeared over the last 10 years. We're back to rubber, and it's higher.
Yeah.
So it's a new 30-year build-up roof.
Okay. Is it, I thought I saw something about it being tar-based or a bit roof.
It is. It's a mod bit,
Yeah.
modified bitumen roof.
Yeah. And that's just because of availability. You can't get TPO or something like that.
You can get TPO, but you don't get necessarily the same warranty out of the TPO. But we have put TPOs on some roofs. We put a base sheet and a TPO cap sheet.
Right.
So we had some redundancy built into it.
Yeah. And then the penetrations, are they pitch pockets or are they more mechanical fastening?
The penetrations, we have roof curbs that are a minimum of 8 to 12 inches off the roof, and then any other, like a conduit or something coming through would be a pitch pocket.
Yeah. Yeah. Not wild about that. Okay.
Not a whole lot of options.
Yeah.
We could talk about that.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great.
So South Langston Elementary School, the structural steel for the two-story piece is finished. The roof installation started. The concrete slabs are poured within the building, the elevated slab, the slab on grade. As you know, this two-story piece of construction at South Limestone is key. It's our critical path to this project being successful. We had a lot of utilities to relocate up front from Eagle Road to the new mechanical room. All of the new stuff that we need is sitting there waiting to be terminated into the new building. The existing utilities are still there serving the building. So we have duplicated services, some crossing over, some challenging pieces there. As soon as we get to the summer, we'll terminate all the existing, we'll make the connections to the new, and we'll be fired up with all new systems. For the first time, we'll be feeding that building the mechanical system with propane instead of number 2 fuel oil. So we'll be getting away from that. As you know, it is a well on the site, so we will continue to have domestic water, but at least we can have a more efficient fuel. Well, it was efficient until the fuel costs have gone crazy, but it's still the most efficient as far as our options. One of the challenges we have here is the fire storage tank. We have to have this tank. The township wants us to have sprinklers up and running in each phase as we go. So we need to get the fire storage tank. It's, I think it's a 30,000 gallon tank. It's like a train car. It's buried under the ground, essentially. The delivery of that has been mostly confirmed for March, but we need a plan B in the event that we don't get the delivery of that tank. You know, procurement of materials has been a challenge with COVID. So we're going to develop a plan B, which would be if we have to introduce some sort of fire doors and things within the addition, to meet with the township and ask them if they would allow us to forgo energizing the sprinkler system for the first phase, put some separation between the existing building and the new, as like fire door kind of fire-rated doors and piece of a corridor, so that we have the separation they would want until we can energize the sprinkler system. So we're going to work on that and have a meeting with them, just as a precaution in case we don't get the tank in time. Otherwise, we're working on the same things for the first phase, because we're going to open that first 13 classroom addition this summer. We'll need furniture and technology for it, so we're starting to work on those pieces. And again, there's a basin that gets installed in the back. We're waiting to do some of the piping for that until we finish some of the building work, so we don't impact the new underground piping. And otherwise, we're really in pretty good shape on this project. We're starting to build the new parking lot and bus drive, which I'll show you some pictures of. And we'll continue to follow these milestones each month. This is actually where the old ball fields were. This is the start of an island and what will be drive and parking on each side. This is the addition. As you can see, we're getting it enclosed, and by the end of December, the milestone is to have this building watertight. So we are in good shape. The roof is going on. We have the entire facade sheathed at this point. There is board in the whole thing, and all the windows are plastic, full plastic. So we are in a position to begin interior work within probably another week. So we're in very good shape with this. You can see this side is done. You can see the plastics in it, but this is what the whole facade looks like at this point. This is the upper level. You can see we come in from the existing building here and ramp up into the new two-story piece. This doorway is the end of a hallway on the second floor. So if you keep walking, you used to come through here, go down stairs. The stairs are now going, you come right into a new second level. This is the lower level, and the slab is poured. This is where the new stair will be, and the learning stair is part of that. And you can see from the aerial shot, this is some of our underground stormwater management system going in. Some of the piping that comes to this is what we're holding off on because of the building here. We don't want to drive over it and damage the pipe. This is the new parking lot construction that's starting over here. As you know, we'll have a new bus loop that comes in, loops around, and we'll be able to drop kids off with buses into an entrance over here, and the cars will come in and drop off at the old entrance. So we'll have clear separation now of buses and parents, which this site desperately needs. The South Synthetic Turf project is basically finished. The site contractor will come back in the spring to clean up some of the grading, some of the drainage, and some new seeding that I'll have to take care of. So realistically, the grass field next door won't be used until the fall. We need to give that some time to germinate and grow and get some roots before we start running all over it. The turf, of course, is ready to go. We had a ribbon cutting ceremony 14th, 2 days ago. And it was a very nice event. And this is just one of the shots. This is the athletics end of the building. We added this internal path that comes through. It is gated at each end. We have some ADA parking here with a walkway. There's future ticket booth here, future ticket booth here, stadium seating for 2,000 here and 1,000 over here. And this would be a field house and toilet rooms at the opposite end. So it's master planning for that. We're in good shape to use it as it lives today. We have seating here for 100 people temporarily, so we can do something bigger down the road. Just a couple of other aerials. This is the new grass field that we created, kind of a value engineering piece. We took all the good topsoil that we had from the site. Instead of giving it to someone else, we created a nice new natural grass field on this side. So once that comes in, we'll be in good shape. The other piece that we should consider down the road with phase 2 is connecting this drive to the existing bus drive, because there's not a second way out of the site, not an easy second way out. So this would provide us with egress onto Holland Road that would be gated and controlled by the administration. So during big events, graduation, sporting events, things like that, they'd have the ability to allow cars out the other direction. This was approved by PennDOT back when the project was approved. We've been back again. We'd have to go back, but I don't think it would be any big deal to do so.
So is that paved or is that just a gravel?
This is paved from when the farmhouse and things were here, or, you know.
So it's sort of paved.
It's sort of paved, but it needs to be redone. There's a little bit of curb. Some of this might have been done as part of South when they were anticipating a shared community use here with the township. That didn't happen, but the other thing that I note every time, because I know there's different groups out there that care about what we do, we did make sure that we allowed room at the end of the building. If down the road there's a natatorium group or committee that's interested in it, there's still room for that natatorium at the end of the building that it was master planned for from day one. So we have that ability. And this was the ceremony last night. We started in the cafeteria, had a really nice small event. The marching band took us from the cafeteria to the field, which was really cool. And then we saw the sunset, and the lights were on, and it became a real nice event. Went out in the field, did some drone shots. Really, really good time. So Scott Layer deserves a credit for that. This is Mr. Layer. He organized the whole thing, did a really nice job.
But real quick, that grass area that you're developing now on Holland Road, what's the sense of the ADs on that? Is that just going to be like an overflow practice area? Is it big enough?
It's not big enough for football, but it's big
It's big
enough
enough for soccer. It's pretty close. I don't think
Close. It's
yeah.
close. And maybe a couple fields the short way for smaller, for smaller
It's
cities.
interesting. It's an interesting, yeah, it's a good point of the way that was laid out.
Yeah.
Elegant use, I'm sure.
I'm sure. Yes.
So, first of all, thanks for the update. I drive by Solfaing Stone every day because I live close by, and I always look and have no idea what's going on. So that was very, very helpful. So the other question that I have is, since you're doing all these renovations, I'm sure you looked into like clean energy and green, buildings. Have you considered solar for and?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the Hillcrest Elementary School project is a LEED Gold certified project. So that will have almost 50% solar power as part of the project. So the roof will have a lot of panels on it. We have multiple projects that were LEED Gold here. We've been fortunate. We have a good partnership with Dewey Engineering. A couple different architects. We were able to go out and get alternative and clean energy grant money. So we actually, for Hillcrest, are getting about $820,000 in grant money to help offset the cost of the LEED Gold project. And for Rolling Hills, Newtown Middle, and Holland Middle, we received $2 million each through the ACE grant. And we have another $820,000 for Richboro L, should we move forward with that approval next December. So we do care a lot about the LEED green thing, and so Rolling Hills is about 50% solar. Hillcrest will be, and hopefully Richboro will as well.
And Solfaing?
So Feinstone was not a project that was real friendly to going LEED certification. It was really not a lot of room to put solar panels, so unfortunately we didn't there, only because it was cost prohibitive to do so.
Is it something that maybe if we work with the township that they can facilitate?
Sure. I mean, we're willing to, if there's folks out there that are willing to, talk to us about partnering, and we can find cost savings with solar, it's something we could consider. There was a big push for solar years ago, and people were willing to partner and guarantee paybacks and things, but that has kind of gone away. We have looked into it here and there. It was brought up a couple times by the board, and each time we researched it, but we weren't able to turn it into a viable project. But I'm always happy to talk to anyone that you want to bring forward, and always keep our eyes and ears open for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Doug, as long as we're on that, there's also additional ways, not just solar, to receive LEED accreditation or certification. And there's also the energy and atmosphere, which is that credit, but there's a lot of other areas.
Yep.
Maybe if you can't do solar, you can still get there. But beyond that, I think we may have probably passed the opportunity to do some of that. Was well building standards incorporated into any of these designs as well, which is a focus more on the occupant? From a healthy and wellness standpoint.
I'm not sure exactly what you mean by well building standards. I mean, certainly environmental concerns are considered. We do a lot of indoor air quality testing. We make sure that there's no off-gassing. We make sure that the space is clean for occupants before they reoccupy. We'll do an exhaust the building, basically clean the building out before we occupy each phase.
Right. Yeah, well, WBLL is another similar thing to LEED from the USGBC. Well, it's not USGBC, but it's a similar sort of rating system that's gained popularity probably in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And part of that is because it actually focuses on the occupant as well as, in some cases, and it often dovetails really well with LEED. For example, just like what you said, that's in both parts. So
I'll look at that.
might be something to look at.
The challenge with Soul Finestone had more to do with the building envelope and getting, in an existing building renovation, you really need that new roof also to get your credit. And the roof is already replaced.
Yeah.
So we couldn't take the 3 inches of insulation off and put, the 4 to 6 inches.
Right.
So we would have been taking off millions of dollars of roof to get our points. It was just not the right project. We would love to, but and get the money and do everything because the money we get more than pays for the cost. And I agree with you. We maximize, without putting geothermal well fields in, we maximize our HVAC credits with the systems we put in. We get nearly all of the points. I think it's 13 or 16 points available, which is big. And trying to get your 60-some points, how important it is. We're able to get almost all of those without going through all the other gyrations of things. And I don't really love geothermal because I don't trust what's going to happen to that field down the road.
Right.
I was just going to comment, you're operating systems that are 30 plus years old and they operate and you don't want to have to excavate
No.
in that time. And in 30 years, you don't want to have to excavate again.
Rather not, right. And the geothermal, every room has a compressor and you get about 8 to 10 years out of the compressor, so there's a lot of costs associated with it. But we'd like to learn more about the well, so we'll have to talk about that. Capital improvements, these are last year's projects. They're basically wrapped up. Normally I wouldn't be talking about last year's projects now, but with COVID we had some challenges. The two are South Terrazzo repairs. We could not finish the project because the Terrazzo installer basically ran out of product. They were limited to how much product they could have because of resin shortages. So they're coming back next summer to finish the project, no additional cost. They just asked that we let them finish next summer so they can get other work done, and that was fine for us. The other project that we're trying to wrap up and encountered some challenges with is the needlepoint bipolar ionization project. And essentially, we're having some issues with compatibility of the units that are being installed with they're connecting right to fan motors in each one of the units. And there's some electrical feedback when the controls come on, there's a surge in power, and there's not enough power there for both of those components to work together, even though the manufacturer said absolutely connect right to the fan motor is not a problem. It is a problem. So we have to get small $15 transformers for each unit and have those isolated to their own transformers so they're not competing with the other power, the low voltage power that's in there. So we're working on getting that done. It's not something I'm interested in paying for because I don't think that it's our miss. I know that the old buildings are old, there's different ages of equipment, but I think the manufacturer should know that. So I'm having conversations with our design team, the contractor and the manufacturer and how we're going to resolve these costs to get this worked out. So stay tuned on that, but it's the one project that's really given us a hard time. just so you understand, all of these systems are installed with the exception to the Goodnow building because we had the most issues with the Siemens controls, which we have in this building, we have in South, and we have in Goodnow. So we put the brakes on Goodnow because we didn't want to have the same problems. What happens is you lose controllers and then your HVAC equipment shuts down. And I'd rather not have this in and have operating HVAC than put this in and challenge that. We will, by the end of January, have everything resolved. We're waiting for the transformers to come in, and they are wrapping up north next week, and this building as well, and south after that. So about 31st of December, they'll have those done. Then they're going to move on to a couple others. They have to order the transformers by building, and they're waiting to get those. Their availability is also a challenge, but we're working on it, and the buildings that they are in, they're functioning well, and we know that because we did air testing, we did pre-construction testing and post-construction testing, and we know that the bipolar ionization is basically going to take particles and clump them together and make them bigger so they're dropping to the floor. So the viruses, the pollen, the dirt, odors, those things are dropping to the floor through these larger clumps. So we did particle testing before we started and measured how many of each size we had in the air. And afterwards, and when we were finished, all of the smaller numbers almost disappeared, and the larger number of particles, or the larger pieces of particle are higher. So we're seeing that they're actually taking the small stuff, clumping them in, and we're not seeing any ozone, which was a concern with these. You're producing ozone or electrical feedback. So we have UL numbers that protect us from all that as well. So the new projects we're working on, Dewey was approved to come in and start working on the design phase and the documentation phase. So all of that is in progress. I won't go through all the projects. We have talked about those, but we're in that process. The key thing is to go out to bid January 10th. And the other piece, I mentioned this before, is reviewing them here on the 17th of February at facilities, which I hope we can also post as a special board meeting so we can get a board motion and approval of whatever projects we want to move forward that evening. I don't want to wait until March because getting the materials ordered is going to be key to the success of these projects with the timing of procuring materials. So you'll have all the information a week before that meeting. We'll talk about all of the projects that night, and we'll have recommendations based on our budgets, and hopefully we can move forward with something at that time.
Doug, I don't think we need a special meeting. I think we just need to advertise for it.
Just have to advertise it?
I think. I mean, you can work, well, that's a lot of costs, but,
Okay.
I think as long as we advertise for doing it.
Correct.
It should be
Okay. All right. Thank you. So miscellaneous, we reviewed months ago the lead in the drinking water. We have two requirements: one, to perform the testing, or two, to talk about it publicly if you don't test. Well, we do the testing and we talk about it publicly. So there's nothing to hide. We performed the testing. When the testing was performed, 129 samples were collected, and only one was above the EPA action level of 15 parts per billion. That happened to be, oddly, the brand new Star building, the brand new sink. So it was hard to believe. So we retook it, and it was 29 parts per billion. And so we're like, okay, well, clearly we have a problem. So the action plan was to basically tell the contractor to come back, take a sink, get rid of it, get us a new sink. Put a new sink in, retook the test, and we're good. Everything passed. We have no issues. So.
And all your plumbing's PEX in that building, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of it's PEX, especially that size.
Yeah, so.
But it
you
could
have
be
to
the fittings in the faucet, or
Yeah.
so.
Do we have an issue with Wrightstown regarding water testing?
No, the issue with Wrightstown was we were trying to avoid testing for certain elements because of the cost. They test for like $10,000 a year to test for PCBs and some other things. So the document went out to the parents of that community. Anyone who lived within a half a mile or something, he wants everybody to tell you, what they're dumping in the ground and what they're doing.
And we didn't get response.
So we don't get responses, which I totally understand.
Yeah.
And even if we did, I don't think they would have given us the waiver for it. So we're going to continue to test, but I think after we test for 2 or 3 more years, we're basically, once we show clean numbers for those in the next 2 or 3 years, we don't have to test for it again after that. So, and we continue to show no contaminants in our groundwater testing at Wrightstown. So there are no issues, it's just a DEP request. And it's funny because for years no one asked, and now, all of a sudden it's a new reviewer and everybody, things change.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep. So the turf project, not the turf project, but the people that want to use the turf, specifically Cruza and Patriot, we've developed some draft agreements. I shared them with the ad hoc committee. Those went over to Rob in a day. He reviewed those and got back to me. Didn't have a whole lot of comments. So I think the next step would be, if there's not an objection, would be to send them off to those two groups for them to start to look at them. And then likely they'll have comments, and we'll probably have to regroup and see what their comments are before we execute any agreements with anyone. But they're proposed as a 1-year. They're proposed as a 1-year agreement right now. I think, it's possible to put language in it. We reserve the right to extend it a year or 2 with escalation and with modified hours if we see fit. That allows us to kind of extend those without creating new. I've asked Rob to look at that language for us. Otherwise, it's just 1 year for each. It allows we work closely with the ADs to make sure that they could use the fields when they wanted to use the fields. They would start, the outside users would start using the fields at 6:30 now instead of 6 when they used to use the fields. That allows the double headers that we talked about and the fields to be cleared before they come in and use the fields. And the number of hours that we want, starting afternoon on Saturday afternoons, not until 12 o'clock on, and the outside groups use it, so our crews can get in and use the fields. So then we've allocated a lot of extra hours for us to continue to use the fields if we need to. And most importantly, if we need to use a field and they're planning to use the field, we have the right to say, I'm sorry, we're going to have to reschedule you for another day, and we can take the field and use it that day or night. So we reserve the right to take the field if we need it for a certain day.
And I learned during the ad hoc committee meetings and conversations with the ADs and so forth that that's worked really well in the past. Cruz has been a great partner, and FC Patriots likely is as well. So,
Yep.
And I think, Mike pushed to make sure that we involve the ADs in the discussion. I think that was done thoroughly.
Yep, it was. And continues.
Yeah.
The only thing I'd ask is, before we vote on it, can we socialize it to the public, those contracts? I mean, is there any reason not to?
I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah. I don't have a problem. I'm not trying to kick it into February, but I think.
Well, we may have to try. I'm just trying to move it because I recognize that they're trying to get the fees to their users because they have to let them know that their fees are probably going to go up, which they will go up, because we increased the base rate, the hourly rate, based on the recent approval of facility use fees. It gave us a chance to boost it and to schedule everything. But I'm sure the February date would be better because we'll all have time to go back and forth.
Yeah, and I was going to add, Doug, I mean, by the time Rob gets it and finesses it and then you kick it back out, I mean, you're going to lose the next 2 weeks.
Like,
The holidays,
Yeah.
brings you right to January. Unless you get it done for January 6th.
well, that's my goal, but if it doesn't happen, it's, that's okay. I was just trying to help everybody.
Well, we could post them now, couldn't we? The agreements, we could post them now, because Rob's already passed on them.
There are board members that haven't seen it.
Yeah, only a handful see them, so.
I think it also needs,
No.
Oh.
No, they
I
weren't.
think it needs to go
anyway
back
yet.
to the
Just
two
in-
groups
just
as
in
well.
turn.
I mean, they're not going to be using it in January, I'm assuming, right?
No, they're not going to use, no, this agreement doesn't start until July 1.
Yeah, so
But
whether they're using January, February doesn't really much matter at that point. Yeah, just give them time to review it, sure.
Yep. So some projects we're working on, just getting some annual, triennial bid packages together. These will be coming up in the next couple of months for your review once we get numbers back. And board agenda items, the synthetic turf field use agreements, maybe not, but that was something that we were going to shoot for. And the last thing I had was we put in the power conditioning units in a lot of the schools to protect our systems. The one place that I'm really concerned about is we had capacitors on the switchgear at Richboro Middle School, which is no longer functioning. And I'll take anyone out to see that equipment. It's a bad-looking mechanical room. This equipment will help protect the existing electrical switchgear from any insurges that we might get over the next couple of years, where we try to keep this alive through at least 2024. So it protects the electrical system. It should help protect the chiller and the equipment that's inside the boiler room. Again, it's the same units that we've used before. Our electricians would actually install it. They would provide the equipment. We'd install the equipment. The switchgear is very tired. You can't even get to it to do certain tests on it because it's 1960 vintage, and this would go on the outside and protect it from any insurgents that we might see, absent the capacitors that should be there. So that's something I was going to put on the agenda. Otherwise, that's really it. The January 6th board meeting, which will likely just be the piece that I talked about, and then the general update in January, and in February we'll have all the summer projects for you to see.
Question.
Yes.
As far as the switches, going back to that last slide, the work, $21,000.
Yes.
So there's 3 units. What would happen with those units come we demolish the building?
So we can use those units elsewhere. Yeah, it's not specific to this, so we would take them, electricians would keep them in the shop.
Okay.
And we have them elsewhere, so they're actually a 10-year warranty, so we'll still have about 7 years of warranty left on them after we move them on.
Thank you.
And they have proven themselves. I mean, it's hard to put a cost on them, but your equipment failures have gone down in some of those old buildings.
Absolutely. Lamp life, the lamps last longer.
Yeah.
Matt's equipment lasts longer. You just
Absolutely, yeah.
It's a big savings for IT. So that is it for me.
Any other questions or
questions
comments?
for facilities? Mike, anything you want to add?
I think looking forward to talking to you offline about a couple of these things, and then if any of it warrant further discussion, we can bring it forward. But I think this was well put together, and it's helpful to get in. And I've heard a lot of good stuff about this binder, and I'm looking forward to diving in.
I'm happy to challenge it because it'll make it stronger. So anything you can do, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yep.
I was up at South Limestone a couple of weeks ago and talked to Mr. Harlan and talked to Ms. Angelone in the office, and they're totally happy with the way the phasing is being done, and they think Colin and you are doing a perfect job. And there had been no issues, because I know it's tricky to do phased renovations, but apparently it's going smoothly.
Today we had a little bit of an issue with the odors from the roof because they're re-roofing, but it was primarily recess outside. John moved the recess inside, and we only have about 2 days of roofing, so hopefully we can get the rest of the roof done and watertight.
Great.
Yeah, that was a little bit of an issue today. We think we rectified it, but we'll see.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Facilities Committee is adjourned.
Nothing
George,
personal.
I don't know if it's part of facilities.
I think technically it's on the
It's
facilities
still-
agenda.
It's on adjourn.
It's on adjourned.
It's on
Adjourn.
Adjourned.
All right. All right, thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Thank
Doug.
you, Doug.
Take
Thanks,
care.
Doug.
Thank you.
So at the request of the board, we're exploring some options for some updated enrollment forecasts. And in advance of this meeting, I shared with all of you a summary chart of 5 different firms for consideration, and also provided you with the proposals that each of those firms submitted to me in my conversations with them. So just very quickly, to just the purpose of why we would look at enrollment forecasting, really gives us that estimate of population trends. And I think, for those that might be either listening now or looking at this later, just to give that background that we use this really to help us to think about our trends with our enrollment, our population, and use that then to really inform planning that we do, whether it be planning with budgeting, school capacity, staffing, facility usage, capital projects. It really helps to inform that work. So in the research and looking at different firms for consideration, I researched several different firms, and there are 5 that you have in the information that I shared with you. There were some other firms that I talked to, but they declined to provide us with a proposal because their plate is too full and they just can't take on another client right now. So we have these 5 that are listed: Proper GIS, Davis Demographics, Flow Analytics, Future Think, and Unified Insights. They're listed there in alphabetical order, and they're in alphabetical order on the information that you received. So to give you some information on these, provide a little bit of background when we're looking at these data. First of all, from a historical context, as a district, we have used what is now called Unified Insights, was formerly called Decision Insight. They were purchased by Power School, so they are now one of the many products that Power School owns, and so we have used them in the past. Additionally, when in 2017-18, when we were looking for a demographer to help us with our redistricting work, we had looked at Proper GIS, Davis Demographics, and Future Link at that time, or Future Think, excuse me, at that time as well. We ended up going with Proper to help us complete our redistricting work. Some similarities across all 5 of these firms in respect to what they do and what they're offering with their proposals. All of them offer a 10-year projection with the enrollment forecasting. All of them use basically the same data to develop that enrollment forecasting, with maybe some subtle changes here and there, what exactly they pull or who they talk to or how much they use the Census Bureau data, but pretty much they all use the same data. And they all will develop a report and provide that report to the district, and will also do a presentation. Most of them all a virtual presentation to the board. So those are, the similarities with them. Some of the differences to point out, particularly on the chart here, but also, in the information that I shared with you, the duration of the work varies. So you see there, you've got Future Think, who is saying it'll take 4 weeks after they receive the data that they need, to Davis Demographics that quoted at 12 to 16 weeks to be able to complete all of the work that they need to do. So the rest of them range in there. And of course, also the cost for the work varies. You've got 2 firms, Proper and Future Think, who are under $20,000, and the other 3 are over $20,000 in costs. And so there's a difference there in what they're offering. I want to highlight a couple specific differences of individual firms in looking at the proposals and in my conversations with them. Unified Insights, as a product of Power School, their cost of that $22,000 and change includes software access. And that software access gives the district access to dig deeper into the data. However, what it requires is that we have to designate someone in-house to train and learn that software and be the person to kind of guide that work or help with understanding how to navigate that software. Typically, what they have asked, while their proposal is just for 1 year, they would usually ask for a 3-year agreement so that we would be using their product for 3 years rather than just do an enrollment forecast and present that product.
And Sue, real quickly,
Yes.
there, some of you will recall, some of you probably won't. While they're now called Unified Insights, as Sue showed earlier, formerly they are known as Decision Insight, and we used to use Decision Insight until, I don't know, maybe 2016 or so, and made the decision at that time to move away from them and that the software product, I don't know if it's the same or not, but that's how they were set up at that time
Why
as
did
well.
you decide to move away at that time?
It was a couple-fold. One, the main reason was because a lot of the onus, just with their model, was on this software, and so it was on us to to do the work that we were really looking for professionals to be able to do. And then you couple that with the fact that, we're just, short-staffed. Our head count relative to, from a ratio standpoint, isn't quite what most other school districts are. And so it was a recipe, particularly as we were approaching redistricting. In non-redistricting times, it was perfectly fine, but approaching redistricting, it was really just a
Another thing
formula
I
that didn't
noticed,
make
they
sense
talk
for us.
about moderate and conservative forecast, so would everybody provide that? Because you give forecast, you have to say the probability, the margin of error. So by having moderate and conservative, I think it makes it much more usable in terms of like designing or like planning for the future. So, just a thought, that
Yeah, I think the history that we have with the demographic companies that the district has used is even if they don't market as such, they still kind of build that in. And whether it's part of the report proper or whether it's part of what we ask them to, okay, give us this confidence band within this, a little bit more aggressive, a little bit less aggressive, what are kind of the margins and the range that we're looking at. We've seen companies be able to do that.
Do you have a feel for how often our surrounding neighbor school districts conduct demographics studies?
It's all across the board, and we have not benchmarked that recently. I was talking with a couple board members a few weeks ago about the Lower Merion School District, where literally they do it every single year. Not only do they do it every year, but they use 2 different demographers to do it every single year. We're at a place where when we redistricted, 3.5 years ago now, we said, hey, we need for this redistricting to last, into that 7th year, 6 full years, to make sure that no child gets redistricted twice. It's hard to believe, but we're halfway through that now. If anything, my feeling is that we're a year behind in doing this. I think we should be on a cadence where we're, probably doing this every other year or so. You have some other school districts that really only do it on an as-needed basis. So if a situation is presented, they'll do it. I think especially now that we're at this 3-4 year mark, and we know that we're going to have another redistricting not too far ahead, my recommendation to the board would be from here until then that we do it on an annual basis.
And do you think that it's wise to have the demographic study and review prior to large facility renovations and new construction?
Absolutely,
Right.
without a doubt.
So when looking back to what Cropper did, do we feel that their data was accurate and helpful considering where we are now with facilities, overcrowding, and things like that?
I think for the most part it is. We're struggling. We're struggling at the elementary level in 2 areas in particular, or 2 schools in particular. One being Wrightstown and one being Hall. We knew those 2 areas. The redistricting committee knew those 2 areas when that plan was approved, when the board ended up approving it. Wrightstown in particular, we knew was difficult. And some folks will remember this and some folks won't. The initial work of that redistricting committee from a south to north movement was more on the eastern side of the district. That process played out, and it ended up being the western side that ended up moving over. In hindsight and in total transparency, I think probably the committee's original work probably would have today us in a better position than what we are. I don't know that that's proper necessarily. And at some point in that whole process, of course, is when Cropper entered into all of that. But we knew right off the bat that Wrightstown was tight. We only have 16 rooms there, and year 1 we were using all 16, and we knew that there was some projected growth. One of the pieces that I think we really need to understand is pertinent specifically to Wrightstown Elementary. Where is the growth in Wrightstown coming from? You know, we saw grades 1 to 6, 40 plus new students this year. So those 40 plus students, in terms of where they reside, do they reside in areas that pre-redistricting were already Wrightstown, or are they across the creek and in that Richboro area? Like, that has to inform our thinking, our analysis of this, and then any decisions that we make. And then I think that we also have issues, you know, we knew that whole southeast corridor there was also tight. And one of the things that we've done since redistricting, and it was because of this, was when we renovated Rolling Hills Elementary, we put 3 classrooms onto that school. So we do have a bit more capacity. We also moved a district program out of Hillcrest over into Richboro Elementary. So, you know, I feel like we've done some things that have nudged us in the right direction, but we certainly don't want to be redistricting kids twice. And so, to me, this is really important. It's important to inform our thinking and our planning for next school year. I'm already leery about the timing of this. It's, you know, it's the 3rd week of December. You know, I think it's really going to be valuable information, and my advocacy would be, hey, let's do this on an annual basis between now and whenever we do redistrict next.
Do either of you have a sense of which one of these is going to have the best ability to pick up and answer those questions that you just articulated? I mean, if they're all kind of relying off the same data, which one do you have a sense of which one you're kind of think has the best ability to provide us the most information and answer some of those questions that you're curious about?
Well, and Sue, I want you to jump in here too, because you're the one who's talked directly with these folks. To me, when I look at this, again, it's December already. This agreement, this contract won't be approved until January 6th. The clock is ticking, and you know our planning for next school year began 2 months ago. So we're really going to be behind the 8 ball. So right off the bat, when I look at this and I see 10 to 12 weeks and 12 to 16 weeks, it's just not practical in my
And they're the
opinion.
most expensive.
And they're the most expensive, right?
Yeah. We probably have too much backlog, so they push it down, right?
Sure, yeah. So, you know, I really look, I look at Cropper as having obviously an inherent advantage because they know us. To this day, they still do our boundary work and our school locator on the website, and they made the contacts that they made. At the same time, you know, I look at Future Think up there. They have a good reputation. They, from the looks of things, are $500 cheaper, and the time frame is, you know, a little bit less. So I think there's a comfort level there as well. United Insights, again, you know, we made the conscious decision to move away. I don't know that I would do that as part of my recommendation anyway. But I think, you know, that you got different value represented by Cropper and Future Think. But the good thing is it's value. And so I think I would have a comfort level with either of those, and I believe, Dr. Elliott, that you would too.
Yeah, I would as well. And I think one of the things with our relationship with Cropper is, you know, one of the items that they ask for is they want boundaries so they can geocode all of the addresses. Well, Cropper already has that because they're with us as a school locator. So I think that from a perspective of Cropper over, you know, the other firms here, that gives them a slight advantage. And again, with Future Think, I think we're looking at the timeline really for the purposes of what we need to do and the information we need to make decisions, that that timeline is much more suitable as well. So I agree, you know, with Dr. Frazier. Either of those two, I think would be the better choice for us, you know, and be the best match. The other piece with those two is what they're providing us is exactly what we're asking for. We're asking for a professional, an expert to conduct the study, to provide us with a report with the enrollment projections, as opposed to a company that, you know, particularly Data Demographics and Unified Insights, they'll do that, but they really want us to buy their whole product and want us to become, you know, do more. And I think that's just more than what we need right now. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for an expert professional to do the study, look at the data, analyze it, and then provide us with a report that will help inform our decisions. So, you know, that, I think, when we look at these, you know, given the information that I also shared with you and their proposals, you know, I would agree. Our recommendation would be to consider one of those two, and not proper or future thing. So the ones that are under $20,000 and not the ones that are currently over $20,000.
So I just had a couple questions. One is, and I haven't looked at these yet because I don't have any money, but in terms of proper, has someone looked at like the disparity between what they estimated and where we're at right now? Like, do we feel confident in their prior work, essentially?
Haven't looked at that, but I think knowing some of what Dr. Frazier just said, and one of the things that in talking with all 5 of these firms, you know, I specifically asked them, you know, they look at housing data, and when they look at housing data, they're talking to, you know, zoning committees looking at what's the new build. So I said, well, what do you do about the sale of houses? Because one of the things that we know that's been happening since the pandemic is there's been such a great overturn of homeowners in our area. So what, and all 5 of them is like, they're like, that's not data that we can look at, because you can see that maybe a home has transferred ownership. You have no idea how many, you know, how many people live in that home, how many children. There's no way of knowing and getting any data from that information. So there's a gap there that I think when we look at as you know, Dr. Frazier said, we had 42 new students at Wrightstown. Well, that's not something that an enrollment projection is going to show you. If those are all move in and out of homes that already exist. So it's something that we can do, and I'm happy to do that and look at a comparison of their enrollment projection to what our actuals are for this year. Can definitely do that and provide that information, you know, for the board with the best of my knowledge of how to, I can give you the numbers of comparison, so you can see where we are relative to that. So I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, Mrs. Marcel, I did look at that over the summer. It was before some of the transiency occurred that ended up occurring. At that point, at least, certain, I mean, they were within, you got these confidence bands, right? As you might recall, each year you go out, they get a little bit wider.
Yeah.
So croppers, as of this summer anyway, I haven't looked at it since the summer, but they were definitely within that confidence band at that time.
And I think I recall that during redistricting, you know, there were really certain models they would look at in terms of growth. And I feel like our area has a higher level of growth from a student population, just because of the fact that we have a great school district, thankfully, and you know, people want to move here, which I think has increased during the pandemic too. I know even when I was just walking door to door from the primary to the general, like houses had flipped already, and there were brand new families in, and even if they didn't have kids in school, they would within a few years. And so I just want to make sure, I really appreciate you guys going out and getting additional firms, because I think this is so important. But I really want to make sure that whomever we go with is just sensitive to the fact that we're not the same as a school district somewhere else. It's not just like a cookie cutter approach an equation like that, there's a little bit extra, kind of that you need to take into consideration. I don't know if any of them actually can help us to achieve the right answer to that, but I know that's just a concern that I have, is just how do you use your modeling to get us as accurate? I know it's really difficult, for them to estimate it within those bands, but I just want to make sure that whomever we go with, that is the best outcome, and that we're paying for quality work. That we're not paying for somebody to run software and spit something out, when in reality there's some complex aspects to our district, and the fact that we have overcrowding in Holland Elementary and Wrights Elementary, which are smaller schools, we don't have a lot of flexibility. And so I just want to make sure that this is that this is something we're going to keep doing. Clearly, this isn't like a one and done. But to your point about trying to work with someone for the future, that's just what's on my mind. So, but I really appreciate you guys doing this. So thank you very much. And it's great work. So thank you.
I would agree with everything that myself said, and I think the history with Cropper is an advantage, and the idea of continuing to work with a demographer year in, year out, to your point, Dr. Fraser, if we're going to do this annually, to have a long-term relationship is a good thing. I think that a $500 difference is negligible, so I would be fine with either Cropper or Future Think, whichever you would recommend.
Yeah, thank you. Whatever, Sundance, were they still around or they're just not interested? That was the demographer before Cropper when I came on board.
I did not look at Sundance. I think made the decision that given how some things had played out at the time when we were still using them, that was probably not a company we wanted to.
I'd like to hear about that offline, but the other question.
Well, I think along, and if you don't mind,
go for it.
I think the decision was made in the board, different board, but the board at that time was interested in making a change from Sundance to somewhere else. That I think to a large extent we operated on the assumption that we shouldn't go back to Sundance.
I was watching that, and to me at that time, you're going all the way up the east side at that time, right? We're going both ways.
When he was involved,
so
yeah.
Under that scenario, there was a lot of attacking going on, and everybody's attacking. Nobody wants to move, and there was a lot of everybody wants to blame the data on a demographer and then it ends up being at the end we switch things at the end. And everybody's still pointing fingers, and nobody's happy. It's kind of like spin the bottle with redistricting. I was just coming on the board at that time, and I was observing the Sundance discussions and moving to the next demographer, all the public comment. But one thing I think I found, and now I'm realizing now, is we can have all the demographers and statistics and algorithms and do all these projections, and it's not going to be right. And whether it's close or not, we have to go into it understanding that this is not a perfect science, and whether it's even valid science. Because I'm not sure, you're not involved in real estate agents and understanding the projections and the age of how long somebody's been in a home. I feel like that's ignored. We kind of talked about that. And there is some statistics on what type of house, how many kids you can project a statistical amount of who will be going when you turn it over, whether it's a townhome, single home, apartments. That there's work that they can do, but my question is, I'd like to see how Cropper, how did that pan out with his projections? Because apparently we have two big issues, and it's less than 3 years. We can say it's the pandemic, but maybe less people are moving around due to the pandemic. And I just don't want to put money more into this, which gets to my question. You're already planning for next year, and you kind of panicked about the timing, and you need some data, right? You want some data on the demographics so that you can make some decisions. But again, these are just going to be forecast. The only demographic data we have is what's real and what's right now. You know, we can look at kindergartens and maybe some small projections, but I think you already know what you're facing next year. And my question would be, we go and we spend the money on the demographer that's going to project out for 2 years, but if we don't, it's probably going to be the same thing. You have ideas of what needs to be done to remedy the overcrowding in the areas and where you might. So I'm wondering, what is it you want to do with that data exactly? And you've got to have some ideas of how you're going to alleviate the current issues we're having, you know? And that's what I want to know. There's got to be some thinking behind what we're going to do, and now we need a demographer to justify what we're already thinking we need to do, but you got to have data to back it up, right? That's my opinion.
I don't know that it's justifying what we already want to do. I
And
think,
you have to hit some points. I'm sorry, cut you off.
well, I think administration and the board, we have different options that are going to be available to us. And I don't think anyone who was on the board at the time that we redistricted and that plan was approved should be overly surprised that we have overcrowding at Wrightstown or that we have overcrowding at Holland Elementary. I think those concerns were part of the redistricting committee conversation. They were part of the conversation with the board at the time. And not that this piece has necessarily popped any additional sections at Wrightstown, but you know, at the very last stages, there were decisions made outside of the recommendation of the redistricting committee relative to sending some additional Richboro homes up into Wrightstown. So again, I don't think that any of that, at least this year, popped any additional sections. But, you know, it just goes back to none of this was a perfect science, right? I mean, whether it's data in or whether it's solution seeking, you had a lot of different aspects there that at the time, that committee, that board, that administration was trying to remedy. We had two islands in the district. We had this imbalance between the south and the north. And yet we were in the process of building or getting ready to build two exactly equal middle schools. I mean, it was just, you know, a recipe that was not exactly set up for success. And like I said earlier, you know, Joe and you and I have talked about this. I think where that committee started, and that was, as I recall, when Sundance was involved with the process. Although I don't necessarily think it's a reflection of Sundance or a reflection of Crocker, it was just more of a timing thing. That I think in hindsight that the original thinking of that committee to pull from the east side of the district from the south to the north would have been the superior plan because of a couple of different reasons. One is that you got population there, you know, to pull up. Two, you're moving into larger schools than what Wrightstown is. And three, we knew that we just had this kind of glut down in the southeast corner, you know, between the three elementary schools that are down there, between, you know, Hillcrest, Rolling Hills, and Holland. Those were the four schools that concerned us at the time. So I don't know that there were a lot of rosy glasses at the time, and now people are looking back and saying, well, gee, what went wrong? You know, we had bad data. We had that. You know, I don't know that that's it. I think we realized that the entire setup of the thing was challenging right off the bat. And whether it was Sundance leading it, whether it was Cropper leading it, I think that we would have ended up, you know, roughly in the same type of area, unless, of course, we would have stuck with the East. But again, that wasn't a Sundance thing. That wasn't a Cropper thing. You know, that was, as you said, a lot of pushback. And anytime you redistrict, there's going to be pushback. I don't care if you go from the east or the west or the north or the south. There, you know, that's the nature of redistricting. But we are where we are today, and I think to try to make, whether it's short-term decisions because of Wrightstown, or whether it's starting to look out 3, 4 years to a potential next redistricting, I think to try to do that without getting new numbers, new projections, a new understanding of what's happening, it's just not the way I would recommend to the board that we go. Whether it's proper or whether it's future think, that's a decision that the board has to make. But I think to not have this data is, just asking for additional problems down the road.
I appreciate that, because we're looking at redistricting every 7 years, so you don't so, I mean, not for 7 years when we did it, so that we don't double redistrict somebody. And I think getting projections now for 4 years down the road is not going to help us 4 years down the road. The actual data we're collecting is the most valuable data we have. It's the current data and the last historical data. That is what we have to use. That's what we can work with. People have been doing this for about a century without demographers, and they get crayons and maps. And they make the stuff work with intuition and as much information as they can get. But my question is, should we be anticipating some kind of spot redistricting come summer? Because I'm not looking forward to having any discussion about that. Not using a demographer, just do what you have to do. I don't think you're going to get data to do what you already think we have to do if we need to do it. And I don't want to be surprised in the new year that we're going to have to redistrict. If we have a problem, we have a problem. And a demographer is not going to fix it. It's not even going to give us projections that are going to be accurate, unless there's a guarantee on it. But I just want to know if that's what we're looking at. Are we looking at spotting, moving?
Joe, honestly, I don't know. And I guess that's the entire premise of us coming to you this evening, is that I don't know, we don't know.
He's asking for this information to make a decision.
Right. I don't know what the right answer is.
So with the projection, you would redistrict based on a projection?
Well, I think we use all kinds of different information to make decisions, right? To make informed decisions. And I think this is not only a piece of that information, but a really valuable piece of information, because no, it's not going to be exact, but it's going to be it's going to be more accurate in year 1 than it's going to be in year 10, right? As you talk about a 10-year projection. And B, it's going to be a heck of a lot more accurate than anything I can think of or come up with, or anyone. I mean, this isn't what we're trained to do. So I see the value, but ultimately, of course, it's up to the board.
Thank you for fielding my questions.
Certainly.
So I just want to say that what Christine said before, I also was out knocking on doors, and I found a lot of people that moved into this area because of the schools. They got out of New York. So that would have, if the projection was done of the forecast before COVID, they would not have known that, this was coming. At the same time, again, knocking on doors, I had a lot of parents telling me that they moved their kids out of the district, either private schools or homeschooling, because they were comfortable with the health and safety plan, and maybe the kids have issues, health issues, and so on. So I think it's going to be very challenging for these people to do the forecast. I don't know what kind of questions they ask, but for me, I love data. So when I make a decision, the more data that I have, I will feel more comfortable. Even if in the end I go with my gut feeling, it'd be good to know, to have some expert give me information about. And also if we know how they did the study, that would be very helpful too. So, I mean, would they take this issues into consideration, people moving in and out of the district for like various reasons? I assume they do that, right? When they do the forecast?
Yeah, I believe they do. In fact, I mean, and Dr. Elliott, you touched on this earlier, and I haven't spoken with Cropper here about, as you have, around their current methodology, but if I recall, and some of you might who were on the board at the time, part of the struggle that some had with what Sundance was doing was that Sundance was not, if I recall correctly, I hope I'm not stating this incorrectly, that Cropper, or that Sundance was not factoring in the resale market, whereas Cropper was, if I recall that correctly. So, in the resale piece, Mr. Sullivan, you and I've talked about it, just in terms of, the neighborhoods and the homes that are around you, and certainly I know other places in the school district where, yeah, there's a lot of neighborhoods that are turning over, and, when you talk about the reputation of the school district, that's going to happen, and that's a good thing to happen. But for us to try to forecast that, we can find out about new housing developments. We can, and housing starts and size of houses, and understand how many school-age children, different ages, the formulas are, and all that. But for us, it's not so much the new home development. It's a lot more the resale market, and again, we're not. At least I'm not. I wouldn't know where to begin to try to understand that.
I think too, all of the demographers, whether it was Sundance that we used before, or even Cropper, would say that, the things that greatly impact an enrollment forecast or projection are economic changes. And so, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and that has had significant impact economically on things that are happening. So, so we know that that's obviously had an impact on our numbers, and doing an updated enrollment forecast is going to give us newer numbers that are reflective of what's been happening, rather than the numbers from 3-4 years ago that didn't take into account the pandemic that we're in, because no one knew about it or could predict it happening. So I think that the data will definitely provide us with some new information to help us make informed decisions. Mr. Solomon, I think you were.
I'm going to defer to Dr. Ford.
Okay.
I don't know who's refereeing this one, but
John.
yeah, I see that. Couple of things. One, we definitely need an error projection. I want to know how good they did. Two, to Mrs. Marcel's point, I model very complex things, and everybody's special except they're not. Trends are what they are. There's nothing special about Council Rock when it comes to demography. It's the same everywhere. I mean, trends are what they are. There's nothing special. It's economically driven. It's housing driven. It just is. And thirdly, for these new board members, and those reliving a redistricting from a couple years ago, the biggest challenge this board had was we hamstrung ourselves. We set all these rules of engagement. We brought in hundreds of people that were never going to agree and did it. What these people up on the screen do is come in, make a projection, and tell you where to put kids. And you should listen to them, and then it's done. It doesn't take 2 years. It doesn't take 30 years to build up the energy to do it. It just happens. So whoever we pick here, make sure you like them, because I really, really would recommend you never, ever do that again, what we did the last time, because it was never going, you're going to have problems. You're going to have flames and pitchforks, and you're going to have board members that want to relive it over and over again. And it just, the easiest way to do it for a board is to hire a professional, tell them where to put kids, and then end it. And they're the bad guys, and they're also the professionals, and you can defer to them. And I didn't know you were going to recommend every year for the next 3 or 4 years, but I got to be honest with you, if you're planning on a 7-year turnover and redistricting again, that's beautiful. It's beautiful, because at the end of these 3 or 4 years, the democracy can say, do this, and it should just be a board vote. It shouldn't be thousands and thousands of hours and angst and nasty emails, oh, you can see that school from my house. All that stuff should never have happened the last time. And so, as someone who actually models this stuff, the further out you get, the bigger the error bar is. Period. It just is. I'd like to see how good they did, not to prove they were good or not, but to prove what that error bar is. That's halfway, that's an error bar. You can project that up with a great deal more confidence than you can in actual numbers. So it's important. I know it's going to be a pain to put together. In terms of is the district growing or not, I'm going to do that in 15 minutes on a spreadsheet. We have total numbers for the last 30 years. And I can tell you, they aren't going up. They're not going up. Where people live are changing, but the numbers aren't going up. And so we're not going to have this explosion. To the point of why do we need it now, we're about to add on or renovate Richboro Middle School. It'll hold 10 more classrooms. I'd like to know if we need them now, not after we build them. Huh? Richboro Elementary, I'm sorry. I'd like to get this year because Hillcrest would have taken 10 more classrooms. But we just plowed ahead and we didn't have any numbers. So that's why we need it now, not in 4 years when we're going to redistrict. We're throwing money at these schools. Let's build them to the right size. So my point is, pick somebody you want to have a relationship with, because I think it's really silly to change them, and pick someone who's going to have the wherewithal at the end of this to say, put kids here, and make sure you've got that. You know, Decision Insights or Unified Insights, that's $26K a year after the first year. I mean, I wouldn't go with a conglomerate ever for this stuff. You want somebody who's going to own it. They're not going to own anything. Cropper will, Davis will. Future thing I don't know anything about. So,
Mike, I have a question, Mike.
Um,
I have a question for Mike.
Thank you. Well, let's not ask each other questions.
I want to ask him a question.
Let's just talk.
When he doesn't
Mike,
have
you have a
kids.
minute
And
after
then,
that.
and then Mary Ann.
So, I don't want to relive what I sat through with that committee, because it was a many nights out of the house. Dr. Frazier, who's Lower Marion using? You don't know, that's fine.
A, it's been a while since I've looked, and B, I know that they made one switch. At one point, they actually used Sundance, but I'm not sure if they do anymore.
Future Think lists Lower Marion as one of their
Who
clients.
does?
Future Think lists Lower Marion as one of their clients. I don't know if it's current or not.
So I would only ask to get an answer on that, only because I'd like to know. And I think there's a base model there for the building. And the only thing that I would suggest is I want this expedited as quick as we can. I would even consider a special meeting to get it expedited. But I would ask that we do a 3-year deal and see if they can work that number even lower over the course of 3 years. I don't want to wait and skip a year. I want to stay consistent. We're talking about kids' education. We're talking about overfilled classrooms. And if I got to hire Matt Frederickson or somebody to do the work that they're giving the software for, it's cheaper to do 3-year contracts than it is to bring somebody in at X amount of dollars a year internally. Or at least something where we can go back to maybe it's not a full 3-year deal, but maybe there's something in addition. I want a 3-year look at this. Yeah. I don't want to sit here and do a year, and then we come back, because I may not be here in 3 years, and then you're going to the board, and I might volunteer to be back on that committee. No, I'm not going to do that. But I think a 3-year model gives a sense of where we're going, and it's consistent. Spring Mill is going to overflow Maureen Welch very quickly if all kids move into that development. And they're popping up in our neighborhoods.
Yes.
Are they moving into Spring Mill?
Ms. McKee's up next.
You wouldn't know that until they get in there, but I would venture to say there's going to be a lot. You have to prepare for that. And that's one of the things we talked about in committee. What does this look like if 75 houses move in? Is it 75 kids, 150 kids? You don't know that, and that's the shot in the dark. A 3-year look keeps a consistent look over 3 years. It'll get you to the end when you're ready to redistrict, whatever that looks like at that point. But it gets you in position to prepare for that. Your team's in place, you're in place with them. If we can save some money over the course of 16.5, dollars don't matter to me. I never want to go with the lowest one. I lived in Philadelphia for years. You always want the lowest, and you don't get a bang for your buck. But with that being said, Cropper is a part of the family here, so to speak. I'd go back to them and see what they can do on that number if we give them a 3-year deal, and I would ask this board to consider that if the administration agrees with that.
Ms. McKay.
So a couple of things. First, I like a lot of what you had to say, Mr. Salmon. And in listening to Dr. Thorwart, I also don't want to revisit the redistricting years. I think it just, my eyes start twitching. But along with what you said about that entire process and how it went, let's remind ourselves, we had not been redistricted in how many years? It was not a part of the culture. People weren't prepared for it. They didn't want to have it happen. And I think, if I recall, part of our conversations went around, we're not going to put ourselves in that position again. We're going to position ourselves so that redistricting is part of normal business in this district. I agree that we need to get data. I like the idea of let's try and get a 3-year contract. This is a very important tool for the decisions that we have to make going forward, and we've got tough decisions to make as we look at these buildings. I agree that Cropper's got history with us. I'd be happy to see them partner with us in doing this work. And the element of time, I agree, is essential. So I would very much like to move this forward. I would also support Cropper if that's the will of the board.
Anyone else? Joe?
Yeah,
Let me know.
no, it's fine. No, so, you were saying use the demographer, just whatever he says goes, right? Now, the demographer, if I'm the demographer, I have A, B, and C. There's more than one way to skin the cat. I'm gonna ask for some feedback from somebody. I'm gonna ask for some, which one would work better for you? Who's the person on the board or in the administration? Because what will ultimately happen if you say, just go with what the demographer says? The demographer can't do anything without people's preferences or, someone's going to give some influence onto that. And I just want to make sure if we're going to go down that path where we're going to say, we're just going to go with what you finally recommend, I want to make sure that this is completely transparent, because that's what I felt was not the case. And I'm not reliving anything. I said I came on this board to be transparent, and I want to see some transparency. I don't want to use a demographer to come up with ideas that somebody else came up with and said, this is what the expert said. Because you may have a conversation with the demographer that I don't know, or you may, or I may. We all have our own personal preferences. There's certain things we have to do. So I just hope that if we're going to go down this path, we're going to start talking about rely on the experts, that we know who's had input and keep track of it.
I think those are all good
Thank you.
points. I don't think at this point we are talking about approving a contract with a demographer to make decisions for us. I think we're simply talking about a demographer providing information. So
I was responding to what Mike said.
I know,
Not what
I'm
you
just,
said.
I'm just making my point, which is that's not what we're asking the demographer to do here. We're asking for data. So,
Mr. Tate, if I could, I would just add that my personal experience being on the committee, when Cropper took over, I was extremely impressed with what and how he did things.
yeah.
I mean, he got in the car and drove neighborhoods, which was extremely impressive when you're talking about, please don't move the person across the street from me because they're in my development.
Yeah.
But yet, when you look at the map, it's like, how are they across the street from you? The attention to detail was there. I don't want to be up where we got. I just think that I almost wish he was first. And Dr. Owen, I think he would argue that you would agree with that. If he was our first, and it's not a shot at anybody else,
Yeah.
the way he conducted business to me was really, it was well done. I just think the end result of where we are and how we got there, I think if it was flipped, I think the city or the district would have been happier, but you're never going to be happy when you put the personal part of it into there. And one of the things that we could all agree on, or I think the parents can all agree on, you fall in love with your schools.
Yeah.
And you never want to get rid of that love. And it's hard to say your kid's not going to a different school next year because of redistricting. I had a PTO meeting the other week and I asked the parents, how's it going here? Do you want to go back? No. Now they fell in love again. But that's what we do here because we're that good. But to me, again, and not because I'm pushing it, but I want to push it, I don't think this is a one and done. I'd like to see it over the course of 3 years.
I think it's a great idea.
I think it's a good idea, but I also think that similar to the conversation about turf earlier, making sure the public is aware. making sure that the public is aware that we're even having this discussion, because most people are, thinking about the holidays and concerts and the things they should be thinking about, frankly. But I just want to make sure, I like the idea of 3 years, but I just want to make sure the public is aware, because we come back and we have our meeting and we're right there.
While I agree with that, this is only a tool in Dr. Fraser's toolbox. So I would argue that this could actually be a tool every year in his toolbox moving forward. So I would argue, or have that conversation with the public, is that we need to do this now and move on with it in the future. Is almost a line item in Mr. Harris's budget that this is going to be there. Because even if you stay at $16,000, you're not getting an employee that cheap to do the work. So for me, we do farm out some of our work. It's just a part of what we do. And I think it makes us look better, and we don't have kids in places we don't want them in our schools. So yes, I think the public needs to know that. I just don't think, I want them to know, but I think it's just part of what we do. It's just going to make it better.
Absolutely. I'm just saying, I guess, because there are a lot of people right now that are talking about overcrowding. I know Mike even had someone ask him, so I'm just saying this is a hot topic. I'm sure for you over in Holland, it's a hot topic. And so just making sure people are aware, because they may not be paying attention like this moment, and then we come back. So that's the only point.
Right, but nothing's going to come out of it except we're going to approve the contract. And I think that's our job as board members to educate the community if they have questions. But I think in the conversation you and I had, Dr. Fraser, we got to get this done. He's got to get this data. So the quicker we can get it done, then it becomes on us. Well, maybe we put something on our website saying we're doing this. I don't know. I'm just spitballing, but I don't want to hold this up because this
I don't
is
think
near and dear to
I just
me.
want to make sure that the public is aware.
The public should be watching YouTube.
That's it.
Can I jump in real quick? So a question I think from this discussion to facilitate is, do the demographers recommend a 3-year look? Would that provide us better data? Would it provide us a better price? Would it provide us better projections? And would it indicate the error bar? And would they ultimately help us tell where do you put kids? I think that if we push this back on them, that would be really interesting for our upcoming vote on this. We're probably all in agreement to some degree on this.
Is that part of the deliverable?
It's not, but it's one of my key takeaways here this evening. Because I leaned over to Dr. Elliott here a little bit ago and said, hey, what do you know about FutureThink relative to actually processing and facilitating redistricting? Because that's not the context that, as you all know, some of you who've been on the board, I first brought this idea up July, for an August meeting, and that was all about Crocker. But the context of this has been, hey, let's get an updated enrollment projection. Hearing some of the conversation here, which, oh, by the way, I agree with the conversation here, whether it's a 3-year partnership, which I agree with, and Dr. Thorberg, some of the things that you talked about in terms of ownership residing within this demographer. I remember very well you saying that at the time, in real time, back then, and I didn't disagree with you then. I agree with you even more now. And I think that is a lens that Dr. Elliott and I need to apply to this, because I agree, Mr. Sullivan, like when Matt Cropper came in, whether the venue was the boardroom with that redistricting committee, or whether the venue was one of our auditoriums with hundreds of people in there, he commanded the room. And that's because he's a professional, he knows what he's doing, he's experienced, he's confident as a result of all of that, and that's what you need. Whether it's a committee-based approach or whether it's, the putting the eggs in that basket, either way, you need that from the person, from the demographer who's leading redistricting. You don't need that from a demographer who's doing an enrollment projection. It helps, but it's less of a necessity. So talking about doing 3 years, I think is a fantastic thought. and knowing then that that rolls into potentially and maybe likely into redistricting, that's a lens, honestly, that we haven't even applied to Future Think or to the other
And
outlets.
it may, I apologize, it may actually not, it may actually say, wait a minute, maybe what you want to do halfway through this is maybe a spot that will, because we're seeing the trend. I think that just gives us way more possibilities, and it builds a strong foundation, because we did redistrict in so many years here. Now you have a nice amount of data in front of you, and you have him to lean on it as a company, and you know where the trends are, we're hearing the problems in the schools. It gives us a lot of time and a lot of good information, which I would argue we didn't have going into last redistricting. And it was just the nature of the beast, it was just because we hadn't done it.
Yeah.
At this cost, I think it's money well, especially when you get a little cheaper for your That's for you.
Speaking of costs, I like your idea of a 3-year agreement and a broader agreement. My only concern at this point would be, you need to get this approved January 6th. You've been asking for it since summer. So are we talking about, if we start revising the agreement and the proposal, are we going to miss January 6th?
So let me respond to that with a question. Can we please be authorized, we meaning Sue and I, to do this work, go forward as, consistent with this conversation, with only those two? With Future Think and with Cropper.
Does anybody object?
If so,
No
then,
objection.
Yeah.
yes,
All right.
I think we can do it. If we need to go back to all 5,
Okay, definitely these two. I'm just not sure about the 3-year. Not that I don't like the idea of the 3-year. I think it's probably a good way to establish relationship. As long as we have something there that if we're not happy with the way they do things, say if the performance that we expect to get goes down over time because they have the 3-year contract, there's something there for us to get out.
yeah, we just so you know that all of our contracts as a school district, and this is the brainchild of our solicitor, Mr. Cox, who's very adept at this, they all have a 30-day out clause, and these would as well.
That's a good question, but John.
And I think, whether, what we'll do is go back to these two, dig into these kinds of issues, and so then we'll be able to come back to the board, report to the board, hopefully before winter break, so that there's ample time before the January 6th board meeting and say, okay, here's what the 1-year deal looks like, which you already know. Here's what the 3-year from a cost standpoint, plus any additional information that we're able to dig up. Or we're able to, if we need to, yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
I
sure.
really,
It's worth doing.
Absolutely.
Good deal. All right, any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I just to sort of wrap it up, that's kind of why one of my first questions started with which one do you like better, which one do you think has the best ability to capture this? The 3-year thing I think is beautiful because I think it gets us closer to being able to catch Mrs. Marcel's concern as well as yours, Dr. Fraser. So that makes a certain amount of sense. At this point, the only thing that I'm curious about is, are we all in agreement with a 3-year, or is there any sense in asking you to ask these two companies for both a 1-year versus a 3-year? And to also connect on a point that you made, that they already have our data. So part of me is wondering, why is their cost competitive with Future if they already have our data? And if it's a 3-year agreement, they're already going to have our data and the analysis with it to look back on what was going on. So does that help with the 3-year cost? So
That's kind of where I was going.
yeah. So if we could get them to provide us a 1-year and a 3-year and cover these deliverables that we've kind of talked, I think that'll give us a lot better position and material to vote with.
I like it.
All right, good conversation. Thank you. Dr. Elliott, are we done?
I believe we are.
we still have one more meeting.
Yes.
I'm aware of that. I just want to make sure she was done. Good, thank you, good conversation. So now we can adjourn the facilities committee.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Guys ready to call to order? Finance Committee meeting. I'm going to leave it to Jason Harris. Do you want to just run with the agenda, Jason?
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for sticking around. Happy holidays to everyone in advance, and hope your days are very bright. First, just a quick overview of the agenda. There is a donation that's going to be on the agenda for consideration. Treasurer appointment, and ancillary to that is the appointment to the Tax Collectors Committee, which I've been made aware of, and the consideration of the opt-out resolution for Act 1. We do have a historical look at our budgets, and then the transportation bid update. There was a brief update about the food service, and then Spyglass is the TSA, and FYI, we're interested in looking at some of our telecom services to have an RFP to consider some redundant services, perhaps save us some money through that. So Team Mason donation at Church Elementary. One of my greatest joys is to meet with Jill
Kingston.
Thank you. And she had a great story concerning Mason and ringing the bell, overcoming a cancer bout, and they wanted to make the donation back to the school. So we are eagerly preparing to that classroom, 12 ledge desks, wobble stools, which the kinesthetic motor issues, shelving, storage, carpet pads, a pad catcher kit, which actually students will be able to video themselves and create opportunities for talking about what we learned, portrait cutters, Fabmaker Studio software, and the reusable steam lamps, which is a donation in the neighborhood of $6,000. Wow. It is very generous, it is amazing, and it is also in line, this is talking with Dr. Elliott, part of what we want to see happen in all of our schools.
That leads me to my first question is, so now we have one school with it, what about the others? Education. Are we on uneven, you know where I'm going?
I do know where you're going,
Yeah.
and I can share that I know in quite a few of our schools, teachers, they've been working to build up STEAM supplies, maybe not necessarily as a separate room, but they've really been working to add things that the classrooms can loan out and use to be able to do that. So it doesn't get to your point of the same equity, but.
And for the two schools that don't have an extra room, that's another issue here. I love the idea of a donation. I hate the idea of uneven playing field. I'm just telling you the truth here.
Yeah, I can't disagree. This is just one of those good problems to have, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really philosophical for the board. Do we want to accept, forget about this donation, just the concept. Do we want to accept donations when it does create an inequity because now this school has whatever's provided by that donation and the other schools don't? Or obviously the alternative is to say, two alternatives, thanks but no thanks, or what's the cost, 6,000? So 6,000 times 9, for the other 9 schools, do we want to pony up and if, of course, if the space is available at all 9.
Anybody else before I talk? So we had Chromebooks where I think Holland was very good at doing Chromebooks. Their PTO raised $30,000 at a time, so Churchville. There's not equity when it comes to that. It's North and South. North has a homecoming football game. We don't have a homecoming at South. There's tons of inequity in this life. Hello, it's life. So we can't micromanage this. If it's legal from a Rob Cox standpoint, I have a problem with it. I think that we should be encouraging people to do more, to volunteer and to donate to schools. I've been asking that the whole time, just with all kinds of different projects. This is a great example, and you can say where a student was supported by his community in the school and wanted to. Wanted to give back.
Yeah,
That's a beautiful thing. So we got to encourage this stuff and stop trying to You know, as long as it passes muster from a legal standpoint, it's not like the teachers or the student, or we're not creating inequity here. Every school has their own community, and we should give them the freedom to work how they want to use their volunteers' money to us as much as possible.
No, I disagree. But
Okay?
Yeah, and again, this is the philosophical conversation.
So,
And
you know,
you're right.
with all those Chromebooks, you weren't telling them to give all the Chromebooks to every other school district. Okay, so you and Jerry Grubb. Okay, this is Jerry Grubb.
no, it's my rule, Joe. It's my rule, because you have wealthier communities and you have poorer communities, and you are creating two sides of the tracks.
It's already happening with.
I get, okay, but I'm saying stop. Okay?
Stop what?
It's already happening. It happened, sure. My conscience is not letting me do it anymore.
Right?
So there I am. I mean, you find 5 votes and do your thing.
I don't
That's
have to
fine.
find anything. But what I would like to know is, okay, STEAM Lab. We're going to try to get the STEAM Labs in there. Now I'm going to say to your philosophy, then everybody's got to have a STEAM Lab on this date, or we're in trouble. You know, we all can work towards that goal. And you're always, with your redistricting the way you did it, you're never going to have open classrooms in some schools. So now other people are going to suffer because of your decisions
That same rule happened for
should
Turk.
make the middle schools bigger, and then we wouldn't have this problem.
The same rule happened for Turk
Right.
12 years ago.
Well, you got to work with what you got, Dr. Philbert. So I'm in favor, and you just have to bring it, I guess it goes to do we need, what are you looking for?
Yeah,
We
right.
need a consent agenda, or we're gonna do.
No, that's what I was gonna say. It sounds to me, after hearing this conversation, that we'll put it on the agenda, but certainly not to put it on the
Okay.
consent. It'd be an action item.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot more discussion to be had here. Obviously, follow with Rob Cox. If there's a legal issue, we would have already.
There are no legal issues, no. I mean, one of the, I'm
So
sorry.
we've
We've taken donations for years from everyone.
We have, yeah.
PPE last year.
Yeah, I mean, the stance I've always taken, and again, I'll, obviously serve and work at the direction of the board. The stance that I've always taken when it comes to these things, and the Chromebooks was one of the classic examples, because at the time we were 1 to 2. So as a school district, we provided 1 to 2. If we have a PTO or some other entity that wants to go beyond that, then obviously we've allowed that to happen. If we have a family or any kind of entity that wants to do something like this, that's above and beyond what we provide as a school district and what we feel needs to be provided. I understand both viewpoints.
I do want to say one thing, though. If you can do a mobile STEM lab, which can be put into any school, there's solutions to every problem. A mobile STEM lab should come. You ask for it.
I have a question. I missed a little bit at the beginning of this, but just to sort of clarify, is this an ex-student that wants to donate $6,000 to a specific school for specific resources? No. Okay.
It's a family of a current 5th grader in Churchville who raised money to give back to the school. And they asked the staff and the teachers, what would they need? And they said, this is what they came up with.
And part of the wrestling match is based upon the notion of trying to balance things. So could we not establish, and we have done giving before, right? People have donated in current past. Couldn't we provide some general thing that says a STEM fund, and it's not necessarily specific, to your point, ×9, it's not specific necessarily to one fund, so that the past students are able to donate. We know where the donation comes from, but we try to plan it out across the whole district. Is that not something that's possible? That way both sides get somewhat accommodated? Is that possible, or am I?
No, I hear what you're saying, Mike. Is that not the function of CREP? I mean, our education foundation, I believe, serves a lot of this purpose.
Right.
And I would think, to your point, Dr. Thorward, if I'm in an elementary school and I'm seeing this, I'm writing my grant proposal to CREF for some of these things as well. So just
I'm sorry, but the Soul Fine Center, did you vote for that? That has a lab built into
I
it.
didn't vote.
Okay, good.
And if it has a lab coat in it, I'm going to be looking for heads, because I was assured it was not.
We talked, it was in the design, so maybe it didn't.
There's no designated lab.
Yeah, so.
It's got two stories.
Can I have a clarification question? So if for some reason this dedicated room is needed for education, what happens then? Do we know?
I mean, that's always an issue, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean,
goodness, we used to have the,
If the vestibule is needed for education, you put kids in the vestibule.
when we had the designated elementary STEM specialist that was housed at Holland. Now what? You know? Yeah, times change and you got consequences to those things.
I just want to say thank you to the family for their donation. That's being lost here, and I appreciate that a lot.
I don't think it's being lost there. I understand Mike's.
I don't think it's being lost either. It's a quandary of fairness. I don't think it's being lost at all.
Okay.
I was gonna ask this on my onboarding, but since it's part of the conversation, can we have fundraising? I mean, I know it's a public district, but, you know, some of these issues could be solved by raising funds that, you know, some families want to donate specifically for a project or for a school, but the rest of the money could be used to create some equity across the school, so there is not like a lot of like different issues.
You want to take this or you want me? CREF, I was going to bring up, we just finally recruited a new executive director for CREF. And she will be at the January meeting.
Yeah, and so that doesn't per se stop us from being able to fundraise, you know, whether it's some kind of a capital campaign. I mean, I'm on record saying, and I know that some around this table feel the exact same way. I want to see that stadium built out over itself, and in the not too distant future. So whether it's some kind of capital campaign, whether it's a programmatic campaign, that can happen. Part of the question becomes, okay, so we got the district who's fundraising, we got the education foundation who's fundraising. Like, are we, you know, trying to rob Peter to pay Paul kind of deal? So I don't.
Policy.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. We have
No,
a
no.
policy on fundraising.
Right. So the short answer is yes,
Yes.
but it's, you know, it's not an easy yes.
And if I could add to the conversation regarding policy, sorry to interrupt. I made the note to review that, because it's coming to the board because of the large sum of donation, and usually lower than $500 is just an acceptance letter. But because it was so large, and it does create a potential inequity, we want to make sure that the board's aware of it. And if it is a great idea, then yes, it could live in the general fund budget if that's what, you know, the educational leaders decide. And if it's something that we want to kick to CREF, certainly, there are ways to address the inequity. However, I think it was really important to get to the board this particular donation because it's been waiting in the wings. And when we had it all put together, we all agreed that we should bring it to the board for consideration.
And we always have.
I was just going to ask, has the administration identified a STEM vendor or a STEM specialist that can advise us on what this design is, particularly some sort of mobile thing, because it brings up a great point.
Now, if you read it, it comes, this is kind of designed by the teachers at Churchville. Is their feedback? Is that how you read it or no?
Yeah, so to answer your question, Mr. Roosevelt, we've had a district STEM committee that had done some initial work on looking at, you know, what do we envision for STEM, for access for all kids to, well, we say STEAM because we include art in there, access to STEAM experiences, particularly at the elementary level. And obviously, you know, like the broken record sounding with the pandemic, a lot of that work has been put on hold. However, within that group are teacher leaders from all buildings, including several of our curriculum coordinators who, you know, are part of the different STEAM fields. who really are well educated and informed in looking at what are good resources that will help our students. Additionally, we have a really good relationship with Buckside U and in particular Dr. Lindsay Sides, who is their key person with STEAM. And she's a wonderful resource to reach out to and ask, you know, we're looking to do this. Can you give us some help with what would be some good resources for a startup to really get us going? So we've got some really good resources in place for people that are making really sound decisions about what would be good for kids.
And they've gone down the mobile route. So
Yes,
you know,
yes, the
mobile
IU
fab
has a
lab.
mobile fab lab that actually was just at Churchville right before Thanksgiving, I believe.
What other schools has it been to?
Last year, the mobile fab lab was at every school, every elementary school. This year, it's not going to every school this year, and the reason for that is because the fab lab serves the entire county. So in a matter of, just learned this from Dr. Sides the other day, when they opened up the registration for the fab lab for the 21-22 school year, in 36 hours, every slot was filled.
Wow.
By all of the elementary schools. So in the first year, there were some districts that didn't have the fab lab come just because there weren't enough dates. So we have Churchville, we have Newtown coming, Wrightstown coming, and some of our schools are on a waiting list if there are openings.
I remember that first year, a couple years ago, I guess, because the window opened. I didn't even know the window opened. My inbox was just like ping, 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 because our elementary principals needed to go in and sign up, and I don't know what I had to do, but I had to,
You had to, I think,
approve it or
Mhm.
something. And like I don't know if our elementary principals were calling each other or if they set a timer or what the deal was, but they were all over it that first year. So yeah, it's definitely gotten widespread use in the district.
But not uniform this year. I mean, you can't.
Well, it sounds
Correct.
like
This year, not
not this
uniform,
year.
right.
Yeah.
We're back to my original point.
Right.
So just to clarify, there is a fab lab, which effectively is a STEAM lab, right?
The mobile fab lab from the IU.
And so that's not necessarily Council Rock.
No.
That's going around the whole county.
Correct.
So to this point, how much did that cost, and could we get our own?
I think that's the piece that I was jumping on when Dr. Elliott was mentioning Lindsay Sides from the IU. She's really been a brainchild and a catalyst behind a lot of that.
Yeah.
So instead of us reinventing wheels,
Well, I mean,
Right.
we got someone to go to. And
we're looking at for 9 classrooms, even if you bump that to $10,000, $90,000. But we don't have rooms, so it's going to have to be portable. So,
Well, how much would the special fit into some of this?
sure, absolutely.
Question,
I mean, that's
sorry.
So is that going to operate on its own? I mean, do we even know?
don't know for sure yet, but they are, certainly the desire, the educational plan and the fiscal plan is to get that in, hopefully, with board approval next year.
So that in theory could be mobile in some schools, they can't house the actual classroom.
Sure. I mean, right now I don't want to say it's a blank canvas because that's a disservice to the work that's been done.
Yeah.
But we have options. We're not locked into anything at this point.
Because this request was for something lasting and meaningful. That's a lot of furniture that's going to need to get replaced fairly often. There's some other things in there I think that are lasting and meaningful, but they're not making a specific request for this. This was the response for something lasting and meaningful, right? Or did I miss it?
I think that's fair. Yeah.
sorry, Jason.
Next item, Jason. Welcome to your first item.
So hopefully the next item will be consent. Business managers usually appointed the treasurer of school monies, and currently that has been occupied by Cheryl Bonnet, our assistant business administrator. So because of the changing leadership, we want to make sure that we continue those traditions. So you'll see the consent agenda item. We've already sent out the purchase order for the bond, and we're working towards that end. And then in addition to that, we will have to appoint you to the Tax Collectors Commission to fulfill the obligations for the EIT collections. Questions? The Act 1 opt-out resolution, we talked about this last month, and that's to bypass the statutory preliminary general fund budget process. The Act 1 in 2006 allowed the 3 cracks at the apple. We have a preliminary budget in February or January, depending on the primary election, and then again in May and in June to adopt the budget. And we're recommending that the board consider the opt-out for a couple of reasons. First and foremost is that we're not eligible for any exceptions, and for those of you who are new on the board, there are 3 exceptions under Act 1 for you to be eligible for exceptions north of the Act 1 index, which would be special education expenses, which is a 2-year look back on your actual expenditures, and if the delta is larger than what you're proposing, then you could take some of that money and put it into your budget, in essence raising your taxes above Act 1. And additionally is PSERS. If you recall, several maybe 8-10 years ago, we were in the teen digits for PSERS rates. Now that's escalated to 20, now upwards of 36% for every dollar that we spend on a staff member. There were districts who put money away for that to rate stabilization, but the law also allowed for exceptions if you were increasing your staff and that exceeded your ability to tax. But we're not eligible for that one either. And then the other one is grandfathered debt. We don't have any debt that's older than 2006, so we're not eligible for any of these. I do believe the district did contemplate an exception last year or the year before, but it was marginal. And coming from my former district, we did take advantage of a special education exception in the amount of about $700,000, and the board was south of that, but it was directly related to an increase in special education costs. So you can certainly track that back to track the nickels to the noses that are in the classrooms. It also streamlines our administrative processes. It gives the board more time and administration to workshop and put more of a finesse product into the public's hands when we're considering our expenditures, especially considering if it's STEM special or any type of contractual increases for perhaps the 3-year piece with the, it's marginal, but considering that into the budget on something larger, that would give us more time to do that. And then the reminder that the board can always adopt less than the Act 1 in the fund, and you can go all the way down to 0, all the way down to you can give tax money back. I would never recommend that, but I would, you certainly are within your powers as a taxing authority to do so. So if it's okay with the board, we would put that on the consent agenda. The Act 1 index is 3.4%, and that currently buys you about $5.7 million in revenue. That's assuming that the assessments stay the same. Now, we are projecting, well, based on our last year's Act 1 or assessments, we did have a 0.3% increase in assessments. That's based on the interim taxes and the building that's going on in the area. So we will get those numbers updated from the county 3 times a year, and the closer we get to May for the adoption of the proposed final, that will give us the final number that the board would consider.
Only comment I make is I don't see this board or most of this board voting for 3.4%. So when you put this on the public agenda, make sure you point out we can adopt less than.
Absolutely.
I don't want 6 months of can't believe we're raising my taxes 3.5%.
Sure.
So in my mind, so.
Understood.
Do we have any Act 1 schools? I know we have Act 1 students. I believe there's like, or title, yes.
Mm-hmm. So we do receive Title I funding, and we receive a proportional amount of that funding in our ESSER dollars. So there is not as large of a portion in Council Rock compared to other districts, but there is a small amount.
It comes and goes every year. Could be in school one year and not the next.
Right.
And in your onboarding, I'll be happy to walk you through how those calculations are made and where those revenues live. And then you can also see where those expenditures come
Any objections to put it on the consent agenda?
No objection.
None.
Okay.
from. Thank you. And then, so this is just the detail on the track 1 and track 2. So if we do opt out, the recommended action, we do not prepare PD 2028. We have until the 28th to January to adopt it. And if we were to take the second track, if the board did not, if that motion didn't pass, then we would have to adopt a preliminary budget by February 16th on the PD. Guiding principles of budget development, for those who are new on the board, this is my personal philosophy, and I hope it lives in some of the conversations that help guide, and one of the reasons Dr. Fraser talks about why I'm here is because I've sat in this chair and understand some of those constructs, not just counting nickels. We have souls that are behind these dollars. So control costs, we can control. We want to minimize the impact of rising fixed costs. We want to preserve and strengthen our programs. We want to explore opportunities, and we obviously want to leave room for the unexpected. An unexpected part of the conversation today was why not have a STEM lab everywhere else? And so we leave it to the board to help guide this conversation. And then there is in your packet, you have a historical look, and let's see if so we adopted a budget last year of $250,153,000 in our expenditure budget, and then we have a revenue budget of $248,789 with the delta operating loss forecast of $1.3 million. We did add $9 million to the fund balance, so that grew from 22 to 32 million, 32,910,000. So we would project an operating, a new fund balance by the end of the year, 31,546. Because of these two numbers, 241 in the 2021 actual for revenue and 253 million in the 2021 actual, I'm not comfortable at this point, 30 days in, to give you a best case scenario of what I think expenditures and revenues might be. Because I really want to dig into the numbers. My understanding is that some of these actuals were deferrals from the 2020 current income tax that was deferred, so they were actually collected in a budget year when they were actually after they were levied. So I want to make sure that that data is tight. We also have new tax collectors that are coming on board to make sure that they understand how those revenues are brought forward. So does anybody have any questions about the historical data? Yes.
Just going from the on the total expenditures, going to 250 at the end, 250 million first. That's a $7 million jump, right? Okay.
Yes. So that was the 2021 actual. I believe you adopted $246 million budget in expenditure, proposed expenditures last year. So you came in under expense and you over collected in revenue. And listening to your finance committees from April and May, it was a 2 or 3% push between the over/under on expenses and revenue. These are really wide gaps to what you were expecting. So I wanted to make sure before I put something out for public consumption to say you definitely need a tax increase of X%, or you can cut expenses by an X%, that administration has a chance to weigh in. The budgets are due on January 11th. Some have been completed, and we are talking internally about some of the options as far as building that into our projection models. The taxpayer impact of a full Act 1 increase, our median assessed value is $38,800 at the current levy. That the new levy would be at Act 1, 137,827, which is about $175 a year increase on the median assessed value. We broke that out all the way up to $108,000 or $108,000 assessed value, about $500 a year, and then all the way down to $8,800 assessed value, which would be about $40 a year for a small parcel of land. Just to give everyone a flavor per year, per month, per week, and per day. Questions?
Jason, again, total increase
3.4%. So that would be the max tax increase for the average homeowners. And I will likely put it out in a letter to the community, but to encourage everyone, if they haven't done so already, to apply for a homestead rebate. You'd be surprised that some homeowners move into the community, they are eligible for it, and they want to make, and if they refinance their home or they change deeds, sometimes that gets lost to time. So we'll make sure everybody's eligible. You guys are just
No.
and so, as I stated earlier, I was a little off. The potential increase is about $5.8 million if the board were to enact a full Act 1 levy. Transportation update. That ends the finance portion. So we're back to transportation. We do have some staffing changes, and I gave Matt the night off because he has been working really, really hard. So we want to make sure he took the delivery areas for us. We did increase the bus monitor count. We backfilled 2 open positions. We have those new employees who have already started. We're looking to get consensus for the board. We have a memo to human resources to upgrade positions from 5 hours to 6, which is a more accurate description of the time and per Fair Labor Standards Act. If the individual works that amount, we have to pay them the amount anyway. So we'll make sure we're budgeting accurate.
And Jason, just real, for the board's edification, that intro you're hearing that for the first time this evening. The memo that Jason just referenced has just been internal amongst the 2 of us and Christine Taylor in HR. So coming to you, but just want you to know that is new information here this evening.
And in addition to that, that's the response and the general consensus of the board based on the conversations from last time, to alleviate some of the challenges with the bus monitors as they drive vans. It's the monitor shortages, the full driver help. So that's creating the backlog of this.
And that's one of the easiest fixes that we have.
Exactly.
When they become benefits eligible, it's not PSERS too, is it?
They are already users
eligible.
Any school employee.
Okay, they already were?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the benefits piece, relative to the number of hours is really just the medical piece.
Okay, and the only other question I have is, they were 5 for a long time because that's what we need. Do we need 6 now, or is this just to incentivize us to get some more?
So Matt had confirmed that it's really a 3-hour run in the morning and 3-hour run in the afternoon. And especially if you have the double backs from the afternoon.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I'm good. Okay, yeah.
And then pursuant to that, and we were talking about the mobile Fab Lab, we did an RFQ for additional 9 passenger vans. We got zero responses to this. And we believe this related to the market. We spoke with Rob Cox about bypassing the bid process, and he said, do we have any cooperative contracts? The cooperative bidding entities, the larger car dealerships, are not responding to these things. So we are interested in looking at used vans. We may ask the board to consider and get the blessing of our solicitor to move in that direction if we do have a genuine used van, but that would be north of the bid threshold. So we just want to make sure we have our I's dotted, T's crossed. And we did do a bid, that we've done the state contract piece. When we bring something within market value, we certainly don't want to be gouged on the price, but at the same time, we want to honor the code and the policy that the board set.
Jason, there's nothing in CoStarz?
I wish. Yeah, it was really perplexing. We were eager to open those bids, and nothing came in at 12 o'clock today. Came and went, and there were no responses.
You have a contact at CoStarz?
We do.
Maybe we should talk to them and tell them that the situation we're in.
Absolutely.
Maybe that's another avenue that they could add to their.
To clarify, each dealership, I'm sorry?
We also have the federal contracts, we tapped into? Did you check those too?
So the federal contract and the state bidding contract are authorized dealers. So if the dealer's on the list, they would be within range. We did send the RFP out to those bidders who bid in the past, and we can certainly circle back to see if we can dig up anyone who might not be on the state contract. But if they honor the state contract price, then we feel comfortable with it.
Did you try Craigslist? I'm sorry.
I even looked at municipal bid, so.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sign of the times.
Yeah.
Indeed. And then we do have an update for the RFP results, and they are in the next slide. The proposed combinations result in rate hours increasing from 5.5% to 16.6% over the 21-22 school year. This is far less than we anticipated, so this is by all means a win in the competitive bidding process, because there are Central Bucks increased by over 30%, Quakertown increased by over 20%. And going into the discussions from last time, this board was not interested in admiring this problem, so we were pretty aggressive in getting a tallying bids for it.
Jason, it's a win that you got 2 bids.
Indeed.
Yes. I mean, so.
Indeed. And so we were prepared to make a recommendation before the 23rd, which was the RFP. So we would hope to have some data to the board to either bring out to the floor to discuss on the 6th, or if you wanted to have a meeting, again, if you still weren't comfortable with the recommendation, we could certainly take that to February. But to give you an idea, we went back to each bidder and we got the next best price. And it was 14.4% total aggregate, 13.3 over, and then 13.4 over. So it was a push depending on which bidder you gave the contract to. But you want to keep in mind that the increase was a 4% over 479. So you're in the 460s on your original route cost. So knowing that this is a precious commodity, that we want our kiddos to get to school on time, get home on time, and not complicate anyone's life beyond what it already is, we were prepared to make a recommendation to the board, and it did not make time for print tonight, so I want to make sure that I socialize it with Dr. Frazier so that he's comfortable and get the best recommendation so it can be discussed. Questions?
I just want to make sure whatever contract we hire is, if they don't make the run, they don't get paid for it. I'm assuming that's already in there, but.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm done, blaming COVID for things at this point, especially with a new contract, so. Sure.
Yeah, it's not a win that we want to get by not
No,
paying them.
No,
but
I understand, yeah. You could even put a performance bonus in, that'd be okay.
Quick clarification. When we're talking about the 9 vans, whether we can get them or not, are those Council Rock School District vans, or would they be additional vans to whatever is providing us buses?
They would have CRM ones, they would go on insurance.
And we own our own work, but we're also paying the drivers too. There are employees.
Yes.
Which is also a good thing.
And then they come in whenever there's a situation of, sorry, it's 2 hours before your kid's going to need to get picked up from school, and he doesn't have a bus, so time to leave work and go get him, right? That's going to try to alleviate that.
So the hope is by adding the 2 vans to the existing category of drivers, that we could use the vans to do some of the smaller routes that we were using bigger vehicles to use, which was taking up the resource from our contract.
Right.
We can't, I'm sorry, and you don't have to answer this tonight. We can't also pay our drivers more to be CDL drivers and drive our contractors' buses. We own the buses, the big buses.
I have to look into that.
But it's just an idea. I'm willing, in order to hold on to the CDL drivers and our staff for just these reasons. I don't want to own buses that are not required buses, but if it's just a driver, it's completely different.
I'll get you an answer.
No rush.
So far, so good?
I think so.
And then food
Oh,
service.
hold on, no, I have a question too.
Okay.
Sorry. So Matt's not here, and I don't want to put you on the spot, Jason. We had a long discussion about bus service at our last, not a couple of weeks ago.
All these things, and I grabbed Matt in the hallway afterwards. A lot of these things are great. But what can we do now? You know, there's buses that have not run through my school all week. I talked about opening schools up and staying late and paying staff. Is there any way we can tie in some of the lost learning we've experienced into that type of opening of the schools with a math club maybe? Or keeping them after school for a math club when buses are running? I mean, we're still getting pounded with emails, and I just don't have an answer for our public. It's not saying that we're not stifled like everybody else, but is there anything out of the box we can think about implementing or looking to implement, even on a pilot basis, to house these kids and keep them safe until mom and dad can get them or before they go to work? I mean, it's an ask, and I think
Yeah.
I'd be willing, and I think, you know, just to cut down on the inbox. And I hear it every day. Every day there's a community member that is reaching out and saying, what can I do? I think the vans are great. I would argue that I would think Matt would be using them for some of our outliers, Holy Ghost, and some of the places we may have to transport to instead of a full bus. But, I mean, this is a problem that I'm not clear we're addressing. And I'm not saying it in a negative way. I want to know what we can do to help. Because, I mean, my suggestion is something I want to pursue, and we have no other options.
It's a good suggestion, and it takes busing out of the problem. It solves the problem by removing the bus and the driver. Because mom and dad can get them there a little earlier or keep them there a little in the afternoon, and it's driver neutral. We don't care.
So I have a question about that. Do we run afoul of champions of after-school programs that parents are already enrolled their kids in, if we were to offer something like that in-house? Does it conflict with that?
Would need to look at that contract to know the definite answer on that. But I think what I'm hearing from Mr. Solomon, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't so much childcare as much as it is something within the educational realm.
So more programmatic.
Yeah, whether it's addressing the learning loss per se, whether it's enrichment, whether it's interest-based, whether it's, you know, like dare we say, esteem, you know, after school. And you know, Dr. Thorwald, to your point, and that's why my ears perked up, Mr. Solomon, when you said it, you know, Lord knows, we have turned over every stone till we got blisters on our fingers from the school bus side of things and the CDL holders side of things. We're continuing to do that. Got the latest CDL statewide email just yesterday, and Matt's been on the phone yesterday and today. But you know, you're making 100 calls, and you're lucky if you're getting one person who expresses interest. So I really like the idea of doing something programmatically for these kids, so that, you know, moms and dads don't have, at least to the extent that it has been, this burden on them to leave work, you know, whatever the inconveniences are, which are many and which are significant. And if it also serves the purpose of meeting learning needs for kids, you know, we won't know until we venture down this road. You know, right now we're in a place, and the board knows this. Everyone's just tired. You know, people are. It's been a rough slog for everyone, and that certainly includes our teachers. But if, you know, we can maybe take a look at our ESSER funds. I know we got, you know, that money, plans for that money, and that money's earmarked. But if we can take a look at that, and if we're willing to do some reshuffling, you know, we're gonna have to pay for it. But if we're willing to pay for it, we're willing to program for it, and to attack this issue from the opposite side, I think it makes a ton of sense, and why wouldn't we go after it?
There's nothing better for my kids than to be in their school. They feel safe, they're wanted there. Sometimes they don't want to come home. You know, but I think, I mean, I'm at a loss of what, and I know the frustration. I mean, I see it daily too. Art's a little different over in my neck of the woods because it's an house. And I'm not going to argue that situation. But I'm thinking, I mean, we have kids that are behind.
We know that, whether it's a lot, a large, a little bit, whatever. How can we make the best of something that's really a negative thing and not getting them up? And I would give you enough bandwidth to make it the Council Rock plan moving forward and dovetail it right into our summer school projects and stuff like that. And I would hope and I bet there would be some folks out there that want to make a little extra money in some way of they're going to pay for it. And I think ESSER funds or some other funds.
Money we don't pay the bus to go.
Well, there you go.
All of it.
Yeah.
Right.
So this may be a premature question, but would you see it tied to EDRPP? And if it's too soon for you to think that through.
Yeah, I don't, again, I just go, it is too soon. It's my visceral there is just, I know how spent a lot of our
Yes.
folks are. We all know that, we all understand that. It's for good reason. Asking people to do more is obviously, so yeah, you gotta be compensated, right? It needs to be, because folks are going through a lot. They've gone through a lot professionally. They've gone through a lot personally. That's not going to end anytime too soon, unfortunately. I don't know if the EDRPP rates would do it or not.
And I understand that question is premature. My thinking is just, I want it to be recognized for teachers that they are not babysitting, that this is valuable, educational, programmatic
Well,
time.
it's going to help them long term because you're going to work on bringing the kids
Closing the
further
gaps.
along.
Right. It's a total win-win. We can pull it off.
I gotta throw one fly in that Vaseline, and we gotta make it fair. If we're gonna make it educational, then it's not just the bus two that didn't come. I mean, be careful with, I mean, I had the same problem here as I had earlier. I'd like it to be more than babysitting, but because not all these kids that needed extra help are on the buses that aren't running.
I think my comment from a month ago was keeping the schools open and paying people to babysit, if you will.
But they could work on homework.
But maybe it becomes an extended homework club.
Yeah.
Where you have, and we did this a couple of years ago at Oliver, the staff members stayed back and gave kids a little extra attention.
I mean, I agree we have to do exactly what you said. Get the kids up to speed that have fallen behind, but not only when the bus is not there. So when the bus is not there, maybe it's a study club where somebody can help them.
Maybe it's just homework. I don't know, whatever.
But we do have to talk about education and bring them up to speed because they have fallen behind, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I guess where I'm going is think about it. I don't have an answer for it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I don't expect an answer tonight because that would be wrong. I mean, but you
No, and I think my crux is that we still don't have an answer for the public that keeps collaborating. What are we doing? What are we doing?
Right.
That's all. I was just,
Yeah. And the idea of homework, a homework orientation to it with not direct instruction or remedial instruction, but tutoring, right? Based on the homework, based upon like, hey, my teacher taught me this today. I didn't quite, would you mind going over this with
we
me?
do
That
clinics at the middle
sort of
school.
thing.
We do them at the high school.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and I'm this it's all phases. Yeah. Maybe not as much at the high school level, but.
Has the administration identified learning loss, and have you guys looked at to figure out whether this is an elementary, a middle, or a high school area, or whether this is a region this or a region that area? Has there been, I'm just throwing this out there, I'm not expecting that answer, is that something that you guys are looking at when we discuss learning loss? Is there a way to quantify the loss?
It's really difficult to quantify a learning loss that over this time to kind of say, our kids should be here at this point and they're not. Like, it's very difficult to pinpoint. I see some that say, oh, they're 6 months behind, they're this far behind, they're this far behind. We have students who thrived during the pandemic and aren't experiencing learning loss, and then we have the opposite end of that students that just pretty much really didn't do very much at all during the pandemic. So we've got the gamut of needs of kids. So it's less about identifying how big is the gap than it is identifying where are our kids right now, what do we need to provide for them, and how do we accelerate their learning to ensure that they continue to grow and hopefully grow at a little faster pace to get where they need to be, more so than it is figuring out like the gap of where they could be, where they should be now, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, but it sounds like you're starting to get there. If you've identified some that have done really well and some that haven't,
Yeah.
we're starting to get an idea of who's lost and look at
Correct.
where, because that might, and then maybe even break it down even further. What
Yeah.
subject are we?
And we already do that.
Okay.
So, what, in the elementary level in particular, with the supports that we have with our literacy specialists, our IST teachers, and our math specialists, we already at the beginning of the year provided, did assessments to get a sense of where kids were, and have already been targeting student needs, meeting with groups of students that have those more stronger identified needs in smaller groups. That's part of the practice of what we've always done at the elementary level, so we're continuing with that. At the middle school and the high school, we don't have those same kinds of supports in place as far as, with schedule works and interventionists that we do at the elementary level. So in respect with the middle school and the high school, teachers have worked more to look at what are the priority standards and the key concepts that students absolutely need to know from the prior course, and then how do we make sure they've learned it, and if they haven't, how do we build it into the current course where it fits? Because in many cases, those particular priority standards align with something that they're going to be doing in an upcoming unit, and so the teacher will reassess, do some pre-teaching, see what their knowledge level is, and then help them to build any background knowledge or skills that they might need to be able to understand the content of this next course.
So if schools were open, would that dovetail in with what you were just talking about?
It could, we could look at how do we utilize that additional gift of time to continue to meet individual student needs. I think to Mike's point, we want to be careful that, obviously the bus that's late is going to have a variety of kids on that bus, and we want to make sure that we're targeting students' needs. So we have to think about what that time would look like, but it could definitely give us that gift of some more time to support students.
It really becomes, my son's bus, high school, doesn't really matter, but rarely it's not available. Right? So, I mean, for some of these kids, this is going to be a godsend in terms of if they're all, some of these buses haven't run at all. Right? And that's where the fairness comes in. It becomes, now, I don't have an answer for you. So.
Can I tie it back together to transportation? So we're talking about the education, and I'm trying to, you started with, we're having a lot of complaints with transportation. And I ran it through because we do, STEM club. We already pick our son up at 5 one day after elementary school. And I thought to myself, that'd be great. It's one time a week, but we still have to transport that kid the other 4 days. And then if we did find somebody to commit to doing it every day in a special program, would that work? Would they have to jump? And then I think that's one thing where we make actually relieve pressure by doing something on a consistent basis versus this trying to make do with, try to help out the children while they're waiting for the bus to circle back or whatever. I think there's two different things we're talking about here, right? So I wanted to add that, it's going to be difficult to set up a program like Champions that you dedicate yourself to every day. Not that we shouldn't do these after-school programs, but that's the hard part, I think, is actually utilizing these programs to alleviate on a consistent basis the pressure that we're having on routes. So that's what I wanted to say. But it's a great idea that we are going to continue to do what we can on an after-school basis. Again, paying for it, right? So, and the teachers are tired. I know they are. So, but it's a great idea, and hopefully things will get better soon.
Yeah, this would be a great investment.
Yeah, just to sort of clarify where I'm seeing this, what I'd like to see out of this is something that is more consistent, where it's not just for the kids, hey, your bus isn't here, so go in this room and see Mr. or Mrs. whatever. I'd rather them sort of elect to say, I want to excel, I want to see if I can get on a different track, so I want to do this, or I'm having trouble, so I want to do this. And maybe even that works out where you have, that alleviates some of the strain on the buses if there's almost, I don't know, dare I say, 2 rounds of it, you know, around this time and then around an hour or so later, so that there's people there, there's capacity to address whether it's, you know, your bus is gone, why don't you do this, here's a study hall, or you're electing to go to the study hall to get ahead because you're advanced, or you're electing to go to the study hall because you're falling behind. Some way to capture that. And then if the bus driver from Route 5 can't make it, there's other bus drivers that may be able to, I don't know. I don't know enough about transportation to figure out all the answers, but it's just sort of, maybe we can utilize this to solve multiple problems. Is that, yeah. Is that kind of what you were thinking?
Yeah, I just don't know how to get there. I think
Right.
that's agree.
The logistics are very complicated and surmountable, but when you're adding a union contract with drivers,
Yeah, that's
it becomes, you know, tilting the balance. Yeah, unfortunately, that's what happens.
Yeah. But a lot of really good ideas and thinking, and I understand exactly, I think, where you're coming from and agree with it. Give us some time. You know, it might need to start more toward the bus piece, you know, where this conversation started, and then grow. You know, like a lot of things, especially these days, it'll, how broad, how fast we could expand it is going to come down to labor pool, right? And just supply and demand of people willing to do it, and budget. And so I think we just need to play with all that. And it'll take some time to play with all that and figure out those logistics. But if we can have, you know, some tacit permission to kind of start with the piece that is going to help parents and help kids and, you know, from a transportation standpoint, and then have some time to balloon it up from there, I think that would help us.
Good. Good deal.
Sorry, guys.
No worries.
Hey,
Not-
any night when a finance committee becomes an education topic
Yeah.
is a good night. Is a good night.
And the irony is, we're not talking about budgets here, we're talking about logistics, transportation, and then the other issue related to the segue. But to keep in mind that we are considering making this a 2-vendor district. So that would also increase some competition between the vendors that we use. That was Matt's aim at the very outset of making this RFP.
I like that a lot.
I'm happy with the last best offer, that you got that pretty much even,
Right.
regardless of where you go.
Yeah, so these numbers were higher. We did ask for a last best offer, and we may go back and sharpen the pencil a little more. It never hurts to ask. Related to food service, I just wanted to give you a quick update. We are having similar issues to transportation with staffing and food issues. If you did not receive the communication that came out from me regarding food item availability, it is crushing to a kindergartner who says that chicken nuggets are going to be on the menu and they're not available. You know, we understand there are students who have food sensitivity issues, that their parents plan for kids to buy a lunch or be eligible to take that lunch, and having a hungry kid come home because there wasn't anything on the menu they liked is always a frustration for parents. So we're aware of it. We're trying to mitigate that as best we can, and it is, again, related to the supply chain issues. Chartwell's, our food service contractor, is aware of that, and they do have sources that are beyond what is normally available, and they're doing the best that they can to bring those pieces in. So we want to make sure everybody was aware, and that what was the problem was going over. We do have some challenges that were brought to our attention in our high schools related to food prep, and we're looking at some requests that have come through for equipment upgrades. And once we have accurate pricing, we're going to come to the board and say, do we have your blessing to move forward? Some of that will come from the food service budget, and some of that will come from the maintenance budget. We're just to make sure that those prices are tight enough to address the needs that the staff has.
Jason, go ahead, you go.
Is that to identify, or will that hopefully identify the disparity in quality between food? I went to North for their book, the book thing.
Book share.
The book share.
Yeah.
And there was this, when I was walking out, there was a student in front of me that had some fried chicken, and it smelled fantastic. And I was hungry, but still, it smelled really good. And I could smell it before I even saw where he was. And so that was kind of interesting. But then I think we got a picture of some pretty nasty looking fries and chicken. And I don't know where they're two coming from. Is this related to that issue, and why maybe we have a disparity in quality?
It is, the fryers at the high schools are quite aged. So we're looking at replacing them. And I was actually, the high school administration reached out to me today to say, hey, where are we on this? And we want to be clear that any expenditure does have a separate set of muster to pass through food nutrition. So there's a whole set of hoops that you have to jump through when you're buying stuff for food service compared to items for the general fund budget. So the board can say we have a policy, but then the feds have an overarching policy that's actually a little more strict to prevent some running away with extra money. So we want to make sure that we're tight on that before we bring it to the board to execute. And then my understanding is that there are some items that are prepared for replacement in the budget. We want to make sure we have the proper bidding so that when the audit does come in 3 years, that we are not paying the food service fund back out of the general fund.
There was another group of emails and media posts about just the basic cost of high school lunches. And I got to tell you, Jason, you can look at this, and I don't want to. We don't participate in the free and reduced lunch program at the high schools.
That's correct.
That's why. Maybe it's time to revisit it if we're getting a hue and cry from parents. That, why aren't I spending $50 or $60 a week on lunch? So I didn't do that when I worked in Philly. So, but that's so.
Especially with the recent turnover in board. That was a past board that made that decision.
Yeah, so, and I'm not telling you I want to go there, but I think it might be time to revisit that.
We should have the conversation.
That's all.
Duly noted. It's in my notes. Any questions about this so far? And then the last piece is just an FYI to the board, under the guiding principle to control the cost we can. How many people have used any of those softwares that can evaluate do a scrub of your spend in your bank account and identify unused subscriptions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Well, this would be a telecom audit through a company called Spyglass. And I did have a call to connect with her last week, but that got postponed. This is one company of many. This is a phone call that I walked into that I saw some value to bring to the board, to just let you know that we're looking at these costs, that there may be some redundancy of services or discounts we may be eligible for. They will do the audit for us free of cost and then present a cost splitting measure going forward.
It might be premature to do this.
Okay.
I just switched telco vendors 3 years ago, and we're in the process of the last segment of the conversion of the POTS lines. And we're also migrating from the 6Ts to SIP trunks, which will reduce our costs even more.
Sure.
So bringing them in now, I don't think is a good idea.
And that was my question. I thought we did this.
Yes.
A couple of years. Some of this, not this. But
I have an extensive background in telecom, so this is near and dear to my heart.
Sure.
So we have definitely gotten rid of all of the excess. I mean, these are valid for someone who doesn't understand the telecom business. So I don't mind having somebody come in and audit the work, but if they came in right now, we're in transition, and it just wouldn't make sense. Which you didn't know that because you've only been here 30 days.
Yeah. And And if you want to go through it anyway, I mean, some of the stuff we may not, there's enough inertia behind, that's what I was getting at. But there may be other places where we can save.
Well, we've disconnected a lot of the POTS lines that are in the schools for the alarm systems because they've switched to cellular service because you never lose those. In a power storm or event, they've got the battery backup, so they're connected, so we've stopped those costs. We got rid of all the excess phone lines at the individual buildings. We centralized that. That was done like 16 years ago. So I understand what they do, and I understand how they make their money. And I just don't think we need to do it right now. I'm happy to do it in a year or two if you want, once we get everything straightened out, but we're still in the process of migrating.
And I'm happy if you do whenever. I can do it tomorrow for all I care. But
Well, keep in mind, sorry to interrupt, that would create a perhaps redundant workload.
and that's you've got a lot on your plate. So, and that's, you know, I'm grateful for the ideas. Eternally grateful for the ideas. It's just, you know, we got a budget we want to do, and we want kids on buses, and we want food that's deep fried properly and FDA approved. You know, so.
Is telecom the only area that we can audit and find?
That would be particular for this exercise, yes.
Right.
But I'm sure there are other areas we can look at.
Yeah.
But I would want input from the cabinet to say which ones we should look at. That's all I've got. Let me know.
Any other questions, comments, thoughts from the public?
Yeah, I mean, the spyglass thing, the concept of auditing, the concept of finding some waste, some redundancy is great, especially if we're looking at, you know, this Act 1 proposal of going full board. If we can find money that's wasted within what we've got, wouldn't that be better than raising the taxes? Certainly, maybe not the whole way, maybe a little bit, but, you know, I think before we start asking the community for more money, we got to make sure that we're not wasting stuff. And I think that we got to look beyond telecom. When the right time to do that is, I don't know. That's just
That's
right.
Yes, sir.
I think Bill Stone would say they're always trying to trim around the edges. But efficiencies in that checking law, take a look at it, ask questions. If there's any other questions or comments, meeting adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.